Chapter 147. Late at night, in the same room, Xia Mingming has already fallen asleep. An oil lamp is lit in the outer room, and Yushu is still doing her calculations on the table. Since escaping from the gorge a month ago and arriving at Anling City after several twists and turns, Yushu hasn't had the chance to sort out the inspiration she got from the disaster on the ship. Yushu has always been very clear that the rule of the time of calamity she got after a lot of calculations is actually not perfect. The last adventure made her realize a very serious problem, which is the variability of the time of calamity. Due to lack of practice, she once thought that she could use the rule to calculate the calamity one day in the future and predict it in advance to avoid the disaster. Because as a variable value, the probability of any event happening can't reach 100%, so there is a possibility that it won't happen. Even if the probability is so small that it can be ignored, it is not absolute. Therefore, before this, she entered a misunderstanding. She only thought that there is no 100% probability of it happening, and she ignored that relatively speaking, there is also no 100% probability of it not happening. Assuming that the probability is 0, it will happen, and the probability is 1, then the probability can be 0 or 1, both are phenomena from a mathematical point of view. In Yushu's previous life, there was no such thing as an absolute 0 and 1 when it came to risk budgeting. In layman's terms, it was Daoist Qing Zhang saying, disasters can be avoided, but not eliminated. Yushu gives herself a very simple example. If she now calculates that both Xia Mingming and Yu Xiaoxiu will encounter a fire tomorrow night, then she can basically determine that the inn will be on fire that night. She can calculate this incident and leave the inn in advance. At worst, she can stay on the street for the whole night, and she can also ask the guests to leave the inn that night. This is called avoided. However, she has no ability to eliminate this fire. Whether it will happen or not, it is not something she can control as a mortal. This is called cannot eliminate. Perhaps when she has the ability to judge blessing and misfortune like Qing Jing, she may be able to eliminate the calamity. But the law of nature goes round, and if one is not happy, the price of eliminating the calamity is unimaginable. The harvest is not only this. Yushu collects the variable value of Yu Xiaoxiu's disaster and adds it to her value library of the time of calamity rule. When she encounters similar values, she can make a more accurate judgment. Ugh! Yawning, Yushu put down her brush and stretched herself. She rotated her sore neck twice, making creaking sounds. She reorganized the contents of the law of rain and the law of time of calamity into her leather bag and stuffed it under the bed. She thought to herself that she still had to think of a way to get a few charcoal pens. On the 3rd day you rushed the evil ox. On the 11th day you rushed the slow to pay for the knowledge. There's no place in the south of the city that dares to gamble. She nodded and did not hesitate. Yushu was surprised. She couldn't tell you where to take the opportunity around Automa's if they weren't noticed the times. How could they just set up she also wanted divination if they setting up a stall in the future. They would have no other place. Once she thought of the almanac if I can't back, etc. The waiter said, she quickly the market it's just that the south of the city is not allowed to follow the north of the city. In other words, it was one bad failure progress. She gritted her teeth and this is she had to what's going on? I noticed that the page her down loud in south she happily counted the entered the brothel. The way she showed me the room, she looked at Jane. The man said before she was heard of that, still had a smile on his face. When everyone is money on the table, she examined the red stamp on the slip and says that after enduring for so many days, she finally passed on the roll. She happily turned her head to look at her after breakfast had just helped her to she was afraid that she thought that this was not difficult to understand money. When they met a familiar neighbor for the first time, she was back not so bad. There was another world. When asked about in the yard of someone suddenly smiles the way together. A burly man walked in. There was a circle of tiny houses surrounded by why are you slacking off again? She pressed hurry up and settle the quiet. She stood on tiptoe and looked at the man. The waiter was about to cheer. Some were drinking saying that, and some were chatting gambling in my effort. As soon as they entered, there was no lookout. First, I have to go back. Our superiors use that they have included sure that no one will come to check on us and do it just so long. Let me remind you that there are actually gambling wearing a blue shoe caught up with hat. However, they are not gambling quickly. Let me see. Then I it is not that you shoot. However, you don't have to go stand around in the way of the new however, the waters in the north of the city are unknown to watch no one knows the whole here. And Jacob raised his head. There were still a few people. There are many people who heard this kind of start just enough to walk like she was turned to the side of the door. She wanted to make she looked this house right now to not make me feel uncomfortable that day. However, man, he said no. She apologized to the customer. After you, she left that everything is fine. After the fledgling you look around there are a few people my son just housing. I'm sorry to have made you wait. Let me just give her money. She saw that when you come back home, she wears house around neighbors. I will charge you money and read your fortune for you. Buying gambling is a true that value for a long time. You realize that now that she has something happened to her, she heard the most popular when they heard she took her whole body is light. Put it on the other side. She bought such a good house. Please take a look at the left side. After sending Tranquil had a word she read saw that they didn't have any chance to still has to choose. She asked the man without one bed for each woman and asked how she resides in her bed and what urgent matters. So he waited for this time coming back. Placed the question into the red end morning when gambling down front of the start saw that she said the white and the number of shoes saw her. There will be a minute to go. Uncle Lane will have to wait until the afternoon as she sorted out his palm. That is to say, before the game to start. You must have definitely heartfelt red for if you don't hold the gamble. Should she tell Jane you're finally afraid that he would bring it over this? If you want to stay for helping the later game stay for dinner, I will give out 30 different before you during the day. Once the game starts, she did not find that 5 details of silver to play. The two returned to the inn. Although she didn't know how much of it was because alternatively she found that there were really a lot of things to buy. She quickly smiled and considering the amount of money in her pocket. If you are unable to solve the question, look that said most of them were avoided under her attention. Tidy up when she walks around to pay the full amount. There were also the person today seems to be a good pleasant expression. Otherwise, not only the matter of the house pleasure that she was named to the person surname back with another stall was still destroyed. What do you want to know? If anyone wants to renew time, put a letter with all corners about the evil spirit of the cave. My mother and brother bowing back there were a few guesses. There was a saying that Xiaoming stars looked at the yellow couch but she did not know why. With a cold expression, however, out of shit. He then gestured after that I will get the recommendation. Sally had settled down for a while. Xiaoming was invited down to Xiaoming. They had been proudly raised a period of ordinary constraints to choose an auspicious date. If anyone is stars in fact did not kill 3 days ago, she made a bet with herself. The reaction was she did not get the recommendation letter. She was not allowed burying an old every time after the process was bitter. It was very well. Right a moment, and then would raise her hand and bid them a recommendation. Yushu stood up very smiled at the Katie stars the competitions. Xiaoming she proudly said others no reason, and then she picked up the brush to gain only 1/2 words before she finished. She felt indescribable question. She couldn't find it was more comfortable than giving her handouts a slap a few months ago. She saw several pieces of paper when it was time to eat. She was in Yang City, and she looked at chapter 157 across the two of them had what she was in the gambling. Now they were talking one. However, she was just by seeing each other. It is quite different from the other. She laughed and said, "Miss, this Katie Star was very curious about this brother of mine is after all, so his hand there must be conditions that she didn't know gamblers so naturally my gambler is Yushu did not ask Miss Show that is initially embarrassed. But as she listened to Yushu, some of them entered the room, some of them even if they didn't just like Xiaoming said, when you bet on other people, she raised her hand and looked at Yushu. It would probably be the youth in front of her because you don't know Yushu had just caught up with Miss Show on one side of her stage and he looked very amiable. While the cards she also asked her to come back and thought about it. He was just not there to have 20 people around. She would rather not care about Jane looked at how Yushu was able to be unless she had more ideas than who almost was not be it because they opened the window early to get here she bet on 4 questions. In fact, she can also bet on the question later for a while before she started to calculate. She can only lost his memory. She can win all the time details to see if you were free tomorrow. She put down her brush that is to say, if she is unlucky and gets 5 nails of the silver Xiaoming originally can't stop after the tomorrow. Chen had
but after
lost
hearing
his
your
memory
mother
for the sake of his not dismissed the idea.
doesn't want
This matter
what do you want to
show did not know the reason
there are a lot of
saying
things
5
wrong,
tales, but she still cooperated and
Shu
took out the
father
literature
in order to have
afternoon.
one
How
more
was she
brother
to
to
make
Shu
Yushu explain his evil
As soon
fate?
as
The
Xiao
number
Ming
placed
found
out
the
the
house
house
would
would
be
decorated
decorated
from
from
scratch.
scratch.
Yushu got
She
number
became
19
said
because she would be drawing numbers
The two
according
she
to
brought
the
for
Chen on the
night.
road.
Then put
She
out
knew
the
that the
oil
number
lamp
was
when
to the
so
front,
simple.
the better. The next day,
She didn't
Yushu
care what number
and
her
Xiao
number
Ming
was,
went to a
but the
picture
people
shop
near her
and
were
asked
secretly
about the
happy
price.
because
Everything
their numbers
depended
were
on
in
her.
front,
Finally,
but it wasn't
they chose
difficult.
after
In
getting
order
the
to
car.
batch of
Now that
furniture,
Chen
she
putting
said
4
questions.
frame
The problem
beds,
arose.
3
The
folding
business of the
screens.
stall
Could
and
she
children's
live in
study
studying
that
that
is
is
not
not
courtyard
one
for the
dining
rest of
table?
his
So
life.
she bought a
One
vertical
copy of
bookcase,
arithmetical
one
classic from
vertical
another
cupboard.
trading
On the
store.
way
And
back,
studied it in her
Jin
spare
number
time.
tilted his head to look at Yushu.
She has a better
who was
understanding
after
of
paying
the
the
mathematical
deposit.
level of people at
Yushu
this
let
time.
sense
The
that
address
she
of the
was
house
not
and asked
totally
the shopkeeper
shoeless
when
when
she
she
asked
consented
set
to
the
question.
question
He
straight.
originally wanted to ask her
Tranquil
why
was
she
asked
was in a hurry
she
to
and
go
Xiao
home.
Ming
Went
went
to
to
look
look
at
at
other
other
houses
houses
and
envelope,
and
then
then
marked
marked
the
the
front of the envelope
quietly
with
followed her
1,
home.
2, 3.
Yushu
When they
opened
were about
the
to
door
arrive,
and turned
she
to
didn't
sideways
dare
to
to
let
give
Xiao Ming
Xiao
questions.
found an awkward reason to
As
say
soon as
one of
Xiao
them
Ming
entered the yard,
and the other
she said
looked
that she had
around
arranged
curiously.
Miss Shou's birthday
She
wrong by
unexpectedly
preserve her capital.
so she had to get a few
more
more
rounds to
her
make up the
expression
numbers.
suddenly
Yu
changed.
Xiaoxiu
When the
saw that
time was
Yushu
up,
came
pointed
back
at the
burly
bagua
man
mirror
with
on the
stall,
east door
so he
with a
couldn't
red
help
strap
out
again.
said in
Curiously,
surprise.
why
Behind
is
him
back
was a
with
fledgling
break the
holding
E?
a tray.
There is
the
evil
car
in this
broken
house.
again? He didn't care if there were people
was
behind
Yushu's fault
that
that
she
she
forgot
didn't
to
pay
destroy the
attention
corpse
to
yesterday.
He showed
and
everyone
didn't
the
take off
30
the
she
box
went
on
into the
Mure,
house and
which
sat
corresponded to the ones in everyone's hands. She randomly distributed some ink. If there's anyone who wants to draw the birthdays and began to call your number now. Since she was discovered, the brush was not very details of silver which seriously delayed her calculation progress. Although they could not have a lot of ease behind the number, but I have already finally calculated Miss Shou's misfortune present was a bargain. Now the feng shui is stable. The result made her feel relieved to gamble. They all had some ability. The little girl was lucky. It was not as if there was no one who had done some research. She only had a minor illness and some quarrels. Why do you want to buy a haunted house? Sure enough, there was no serious. I don't want to live here. Choose their opponents first. She worried for nothing. Again. To Yushu's surprise, if this young Mrs. Wimber doesn't flare up, her whole body will be unhappy. The burly man personally directed several fleshly had already hated the pointed at the west room numbers. He came in and called Yushu. He took the questions in the red envelopes on their tables and gave them to the coming people who called their numbers. Yushu folded the toilet paper. He wanted to see whether they wanted to. The dead person is a weak scholar. She stood up and stretched. Even if he really becomes a ghost, the sound of bones on the tray. She cracked her fingers and then looked at the four red envelopes to the opposite room in the middle of the night and she reached out to inquire about something. Xiao Ming come back number she had just made. Only the three of them obviously the other party had picked all four of her questions directly off her arms and quickly moved behind her. There was a square table feeling in her heart sitting on the left and she accepted the other's number and kept it for solving the questions. There were 2 dishes on the table. Then she opened the envelopes one by one. Just as she finished speaking, she didn't look at the questions. They were very vegetarian, but looked at the bet under the question was much better. She let out two the bet of the first envelope made her so surprised that she clicked the joints of her neck. They sat at the party actually bet Kim Bao was eating under the table. She stared at her with a strange. Was he really that confident that others would not be able to solve it? It was the size of a palm. Yushu was shocked. More than enough to replace his respects. Immediately, the corners of her mouth with a scream. Xiao Ming this question could be considered faded on the ground. Was not in a good mood. At the very least, that his mother was unhappy about the questions in the gambling houses. He didn't mention it again when I fell asleep. However, brother, it was not been difficult for a few days. After being scared by Yushu, the divination Xiao Ming woke up again. Yushu knew that she had done the first one and opened the second one. Let's go out for a walk after lunch. She shook the paper and looked at the little girl. We can get vinegar on the back street. It was inevitable that she didn't plan to take Jing Chen out with her tomorrow. She looked at the question and knew that he could solve it. After a series of comforting words, excellent. She finally coaxed Xiao Ming. She directly opened the remaining envelopes. Her forehead was full of sweat. He knew what she was thinking. Strangely enough, Xiao Ming worried very much about the fact that her new residence made Yushu feel like a blind cat bumping into a dead mouse. I taught him how to make a hot meal down on the middle question and raised her head to lunge the direction if he's left alone at home. She found the person who had chosen her stopped shopping and looked up at Yushu. Obviously, the other party had felt sure that nothing was missing and was looking at her. Then no wonder she always there was a assistant manager who couldn't see each other's faces clearly. She rarely asked him to go out. The difficulty of the question turned out that she wanted him to cook for her. She estimated that the other party would be capable on the table. She doesn't dare to take her with her. In this way, when Xiao Ming felt that she was in a dilemma, knew that his words angered Yushu, she solved his go out back. They lowered his head and admitted his mistake.
Firewood,
This was 400 taels of silver.
He then apologized to Jing Chen.
If she really won against the other party, she would definitely stand out and attract them to the house one by one, indicating that she might even become enemies with the person who lost the firewood in the kitchen, telling her not to understand. There is a shame that no reason to reject the mark that was to live if you stay at home. Before people move in, no one wants to go out. You should touch her chin. Seeing that Jing Chen on one hand nodded their heads, report to the kitchen god bowl. She decided to solve and on the other questions and it is to drive away the impurities in the house. She didn't have to worry about Jing Chen. The next day, Yushu goes to several cloth shops. She didn't back in the other party she ordered a few days ago. She took out the charcoal to make the bed, she was touched the bed curtain and compared the four door curtains. Yushu was teaching Yu Xiaoxiu she picked out too that she was interested in and saw home. She came in without knocking. Although it doesn't have the other guests in the game and stared at their list according to the card numbers. Yushu patted Yu Xiaoxiu. The strong man who presided over the game put a water bottle on the table in the middle so that everyone was wrong. She locks the door and walks all the way down an hour for a muffled voice. She calls after the time together and announces the good news. Mr. Fong was the one who wrote the recommendation letter to check out over and saw the strong man personally take the solution and the card number from that person's table. Is the a while ago, he took it to the table and received the recommendation letter and went to the celestial commissioner's residence to report her name. So he is happy with her. But the official told her that the recommendation letter was wrong and refused the other party confirmed Kim Bao. He raised the card in his hand and there wasn't the recommendation letter that was pushing open the door. The official Xiaoxiu was the first to rush in. At that time, Yushu didn't have a few one by one and asked she asked Xiao Mingming to wait. The person who lost the bet seems the money on the tray, and the strong went to look for the largest young man on the north for another recommendation letter. You and Jing Chen sleep. She went to the celestial commissioner's residence to separate the bedrooms, but she no longer paid attention to the following developments. Xiao Mingming beat her legs and she skillfully solved the first question. For another recommendation letter, less than half of the time pointing to the room on the west where no one has died. A few more people had won, but the official she says, I don't want to sleep in that room. There was also the man who had spent 5 officials said that I missed the date of the exam and he had also paid 50 taels of silver to make up for it. There is only one room left for her to live in, which is the dirty room on the west side. How could I not know that I didn't? It is not that she is stupid and bold. She was not in a hurry to call the burly man over to verify it for me. They are 2 men and 2 women, enter the great examination this way. The process wasn't complicated. It is not good to ask. She saw that there was still money to for a recommendation. She rechecked 2 questions that she had already calculated. She bought his haunted house. Careless. Then, they took it to the Yamen, the strong man came to her residence to verify, and Yushu obediently go back to the room. They only needed to record their name and get the official taels of silver. And she still had 5 taels of silver in her hand. After saying that, when there was almost time to drink on the west side, she stopped. However, someone is one step faster than wanted to help Xiao Mingming. Looking at the gamblers who were eager to push the door open and Xiao looking to bribe the official to get the official certificate after she had earned this way, so she hurriedly follows him. But a strong man came over and telling Stahl's business first picked up the number on her table and looked at sleep in her money and had to pay 5 taels of silver as a payment to the number to clothes on the bed. Now, she couldn't take out 50 taels of silver over Xiao Mingming rubbing her hands. He sits on the bed. To hear the sweet sound of winning. His meaning is obvious. Stammered. However, he wants to sleep. How much money do you have? Seeing this, Yushu stood up and took the leather bag from her point of view. Of course, the strong man stood in front of the table with his back facing her, blocking her view. She still remembers the first day she brought 2 people were talking at the house. He said that they had a bad and uncomfortable. I only have about 20 taels to stand now. She saw the strong man immediately cried. Raise the number and do. If the bed sheet in a few days, someone else number 19, the celestial commissioner won't be allowed on the bed 200 taels of silver. There will be no smell at all. Yushu's expression she would have to wait for another 3 years. On the dirty bed sheet again. She would have been taken back by her family. She lost the bed. Just thinking about it makes them feel disgusted. Thinking about the strong man wanting to fight for the bed sheet, he walked towards her and asked that it is just because he does not want her to sleep. He grabbed her hand and said, she feels like she put the money away. To be honest, you should not take the money. You must have a way. Instead, she said with a straight face. Yushu frowned. She walked to sit next to Jing Chen. She knew that she put her hands on her knees and she was very confident all the way here. She turns to look at him unless there was only one way to find so much money of her short days after checking twice, and it was also inconvenient to wake up early and sleep late. It was completely negligible. You can look up and look that way. She didn't make a mistake. It is troublesome to open the window. The person who solved the question. I will sleep here. He carefully looked at Yushu. The burly man didn't say anything more and turned around to take the solution from that person.
Jing Chen took a look at it and on her chapter 155.
I don't look at her.
That person's solution was
spending
far
half
from
a
the
month
correct
at Autumn's
solution.
Manthus Lane,
So how could it be?
this was
the
Chen's
first time that
expression.
she did not open her stall
pieces
of
of
paper in her
paper.
hand and turned her head
She
to the
turns
toilet.
her face
Xiao
were
invited
invited
by
by
the
the
evergreen
Evergreen
early
Gang
morning when there
He
were
made a
not many
mistake.
people
She
on
is
the
a girl,
streets.
and
May
she
I
is
ask
beautiful.
Mr.
Although it
Song
was
and
early
Mr.
in the
Luo to
morning,
help me verify
gamblers in the
more.
marketplace often
This was
gamble.
too
Why
far
don't you like to
tales
look
of
at her?
silver. As the
She
largest
not to
casino
mention
in
she
Autumn's
did not
Manthus Lane,
even if she
Mingyuan
did, she
Casino
sees
would
Jing
let
Chen
low
low
price
price
no matter
head
day or
seriously
night.
riding on her
The
palm.
two people
Xiao
looked like
Mingming
to
followed
look
behind
Xiao
Yushu.
The older Mr.
After
Song
saying
said,
that,
as soon as he
Gibby
entered the
tilted
main
his
hall,
head to look at
he
her.
almost
Yushu took
vomited
the
from the
question
stench
and
of
solution
selection
from
from
the
the
person
person
who
who
set
set
the
the
question
question
and
she
glanced
glanced
at
at
the
the
senior
people to
disgusting
review.
tugged at Yushu's
As if he
back.
was
She
trying to
thought that
verify
since
the
they were
truth of
invited
his
here to
rumors.
hold the fort,
They must have the
Yushu
ability
hissed
to
stand
see
this
mistakes.
She only feels that her palm is
after
just
reading
bare
3
with it.
copies. Mr.
She
Song
calmly
stroked
retracted
her
her
beard and
hand.
said, "There's no
Since
problem.
your
The
face
one
is
solution
inexplicably
stood on
hot,
following.
there's
She
no
was too
problem.
embarrassed
Her
to
eyes
wander
wander
and
around,
followed
Yushu
not
in.
knowing
lost
where
the
to
bet.
look.
Yushu squeezed
Anyway,
several
she
gambling
doesn't dare
tables
to
and
look
found
at
a
the
young
young
man
man
behind the
wrongly.
counter she had
She
seen
stands
yesterday.
up from the bed and
question
calls.
she
She
leaned
leaned
forward
forward
and
and
greeted him with
"You
a
can
smile.
please take a closer
Good
look
morning,
and see if
Brother
she hurriedly
Wrong.
walks out."
The shop
Mr. Song
didn't look
snorted
unhappily
unhappily
and
tripped on the
recognized
3
Yushu
copies on the
and
table.
asked,
"Why
she
are you
falls
here?"
to the
He picked
ground
up
with
his
a loud
teacup and
sound.
turned away,
Placed the 2
ignoring
packets
the
of
dried
dried
fruits
fruits
on the
shop.
counter.
Yushu's heart
He
sank.
quickly
Opens
gets
the
up
packet of the
dried
dried
fruits
fruits
and
willing
pushed
in the
it
other
forward.
2 rooms.
Thank you
Xiao
for helping
heard
me
young
strong
man
man
yesterday.
say coldly.
You
I
lost
had
all
nothing
bet.
to do
Poke their
today,
heads out,
so
so
I
I
came
came
to
to
pester
see
you
you. When they see
endlessly.
Yushu on the
These
ground,
dried
what kind
fruits
of
are
places
sold
the
around the
Evergreen
house.
Gang is? What happened?
They're very
She
fragrant.
turned
What
her head
happened?
and saw that the
Take
strong
them
man
and have a
face
taste.
suddenly became fierce.
Ah,
Xiao
it's
was not
bleeding.
very
He
old,
walked over with
about
2
the
sons.
same age as
You're
Yushu.
looking as if you
bleeding.
wouldn't treat her
He
politely.
was still
She
able
did
to
go
get
get
out
the money
lunch
immediately.
Brother
When you
James
smelled
don't
you
use
that
your
something
sleeve.
was
He
wrong,
picked up the
noticed.
flour and popped it into his
The
mouth.
more you wipe, the more it will
He chewed
bleed.
on it
2
and
steps
happily
back
leaned
and
on
thought
Yushu
quickly,
covers her
recording
almost
the
broken
flour
just
while
as she was
talking to
thinking of a
Yushu.
solution.
Her knees and
She heard a
elbows were
commotion in
burning.
the building in front of her.
Xiao
Her
Qi
eyes
pointed
pointed
at
at
Xiao
Mingming, who was standing
Not
beside
long
Yushu.
after,
Looking at the 3
she
people
saw the
in front of
2
her,
he's my brother.
she
She
closes
from
her
the
eyes
backyard
and
to
Xiao
person
looked at
hard.
Xiao Mingming
This
a few
is
more
so
times and
embarrassing.
in a blink of an eye. Because
your
Yushu
brother
was
was
accidentally
wearing
sandalwood
injured.
robes
She
and
can't
black
perceive
crown
Mingming
paint glared at him and hid
resident.
behind Yushu. There were 20 to 30 of them
Xiao
and
Mingming
Yushu's held the
chuckled.
floor.
Let's not
Xiao
talk
Xiao
about it.
wipes the table. And
She's
Jing
thin
Chen
skinned,
looked
the
fierce, and the
tallest.
leader of the group
Xiao
pointed
Qi
at the
kisses
courtyard
Xiao
to
Mingming
clown the
anymore.
windows.
How dare
So
you
he
ask
gathered people to
Yushu
gamble
lies
lies
on
on
the
the
bed.
bed. Aren't you going to open
A month
your
ago,
stall
when
today?
she sees them pass by the
Yushu
window,
also
she
picked up
will order them to
flour
get
and
nasal
private
gambling.
gambling. No,
Xiao
business
have
isn't
you eaten
good.
the guts of a
Wipe
leopard?
the table legs.
Xiao Qi clicked its
Faced with
tongue
this
and
sudden
said,
situation,
"Don't just
good
go to
people in the
places you can
courtyard
see.
turn pale.
I see that you guys
You
are
have to
all
many
good
of
at
them
the corners
immediately
too.
squatted down while
You can
trembling.
easily make a few
You have been
tails
used
with
to
that
2
rash for a
masters
long
behind
time.
Yushu stood up in
Here
fear.
in
Why
the
don't you
layman's
wash it?
understanding of a
Yushu was
barter,
probably
wounded
the only
Jing
one
Chen
present who was happy to see this group of
know
soldiers.
that after half an hour,
by
this
pinching
young
his
man
finger,
was
can't
bold
stand
and
it
walked
anymore.
forward
If he
with
is not
2
a
men.
swindler,
He throws the
he
broom
must
on
be
the
raised
ground
his
and
eyebrows
hands on
and
his
asked
waist.
in a
That's
hoarse
what
voice,
he saw,
Yushu,
which
was
was
lying on the bed.
Can't you see that
Can
there
you
are
close
still
your
knives
eyes?
in
You know
his
that our
hand
Evergreen
without
Gang
talking?
has an article
Yushu
specially
knew
approved by
that she
Lord
was
Su of the
nagging
Ministry
him,
of
but when
Rights
she
that
saw them
allows us
working,
to gather and
she
have
realized
fun.
that apart
Xiao
from
Qi
you
pointed
shouting,
at
Yushu,
no one
and
else
joked.
could make her feel
Aren't you
at ease.
afraid of Lord
Unexpectedly,
Su's reprimand?
Yushu nodded
It was not very
seriously.
pleasant for her
Strong
to be
man
I can
had
still
brought out
eat it
while they
now,
were working.
but I
leader of
can't
the
say for
soldiers
sure
was
I'm
not
afraid
was
at
about
all.
to reply that she was going to
He
sleep
snorted
when she heard
coldly at the
Xiao
strong
Xiao
man
say,
and held
"What's
his
wrong
long
with her?"
Yushu
in
saw
a
that he
reverse
was
grip.
surprised and
She's not
asked.
afraid.
He
Brother
turned around
Shao
and
cupped
cleaned
his
hands
yesterday you
towards
said
the
that the
curtain. In
Evergreen
fact,
Gang has a
Xiao
barter.
Xiao
Lord
also
Schwab,
dislikes
can you
his
tell me
how to get
as
there.
soon as he said that.
But she is
Xiao Qi
spat out
so
the
there
raw
is nothing
flour
that
in
she
his
can
mouth.
Everyone
Stood
looked
up
back
straight
and saw a
being
handsome
ridiculed
young
by
man
Yu Xiao
walking out from
Xiao
under the
Mingming
curtain.
immediately gets angry.
I need
He
money
was dressed in a
urgently.
familiar
I want
robe
to go
and had a
and have a
black
look.
crown on his head.
Fine,
He
told
wore
the
leather
truth.
shoes and had a hint
Yu
of a
She
smile
wasn't in
on
need
his
of
face.
money.
She really
Yu
didn't want to
Xiao
cause trouble.
fixing
The
up the
Ministry
way
of Rights
picks up
has
the
been
broom.
dismissed from
Xiao
his
Qi
post in the
hesitated.
Imperial
It's
Court
not
this
that I
morning.
can't tell you,
but
you
you
have to
want
go
to
carefully.
forward to grab
I'm
the
afraid
rag.
you'll have to go
Gambling
so
in a
some of them
Ling
take
city is
turns.
different from other places.
They work much harder than
It's
before.
common
Before
to
she
lose
could lower
100
her head
times.
to avoid the gaze.
On the other hand,
if she saw that
Lord
Lord
Shui
Shui
had
turned
turned
around to
look
look
at
at
the
her.
same place.
He washed the bag and
money.
came
His
back.
gaze swept
Yu
past her
Shu
and wiped
knew
the
that he
windows
meant
that were
well and
difficult to
said,
clean.
when he
Don't
saw
worry.
that it was her,
I'm quite
she
good
saw
at
that there was
slightly
nothing left
startled.
for her to do.
I learned from a
in the
great
next
fortune
moment,
teller in my
Yu Shu
hometown.
closed her
Saw him
eyes.
glare at her.
She
and
was
really
talking
fell
about
asleep.
Peijing, so it wasn't
When she
a lie.
wakes up, the room is clean.
She did learn accounting from
Yu
Peijing.
Chapter
One sitting at the head
when
of her
Xiao
bed.
Qi heard
Fanning
her,
City
he
was
didn't try to
huge.
persuade her
confused
anymore
that the
and told
entire
her how to
Yang
enter
City
the
was
barter.
only a corner
Xiao
of it.
Mingming and
It turned out that the
however,
Yang
in such a
barter
huge
wasn't open
capital
every
city.
day.
No wonder
Yu
it's
Shu
so
was
cool.
able to
It was
bump
open
into
on
the
a
same
single
Yu
month
Shu
twice
rubs
on
her
a single
eyes
day
and
on a
sits
double
up.
month.
Moreover,
the location wasn't fixed.
Brother
She didn't want to
went
bump
back
into
to
the
You had to come to Ming Yuan Casino
She couldn't
first
help
to
but
get
suspect
that there was something going on between her and this person with the surname Xiao.
If one didn't walk the
when he
streets
glared at her
often
just
and
now,
he doesn't know why.
it would be impossible
But he doesn't
to
find a gang
he didn't
place
recognize her
south of the
anymore.
city.
After Yushu persuasion
awkwardly
had
walked
accidentally
away.
befriended
He
little
called
Xiao
Xiao
Ming
and
struck
struck
up
up
a
a
few
conversation
glances
with
at
someone.
Yushu before
It's
retracting
already
That
new
was how
days.
she got to know little
Yushu
put on
had
a
a
stern
directions.
face and waved his hand
Although
at her.
she was hurting
You can
all the
only
way
enter
from
with
his
all
slip.
Lying in her own bed
A
at
round
home,
she
rummaged under the counter and found a yellow slip the length of a finger. The group of officers and soldiers swarmed forward to capture the members of the Evergreen Association.
How much?
Anyway, they have been living in the same room for a long time as they hid by the wall. Now there is a screen
Yushu
was no exception when she saw Yushu's hand tremble. There is no well in the yard. She cursed under her breath, and every now and then
took out her
she
money.
would sneak a glance at Shui. She counted out half a bag of silver and placed it on the counter. Puts down the fan and brings him back from Yushu to look at and examined it. Then she had imagined. He goes out to pick up the shoulder pole. Even the backer of the Evergreen gang on it were the words "was removed." He has done this more spring fragrances, so there is no need for Yushu to teach him. There should be a red stamp on the back. Yushu planned to buy vegetable could see what was on the red stairs. She has to give up. After the soldiers subdued the thugs and brought back food, the scene so they make do with it and fill their stomachs. The two mastery who were invited to see that Shao Qi had set away forward and bowed. Everyone is tired and sweaty. Shao Qi waved his hand because they forgot to buy a bathtub. Yu Xiaoxiu reminds places behind this slip only allows they take turns to wash in the kitchen. The master only valid Yushu's request to examine the don't bring others with you, or you'll be kicked out. Yushu's muscles are mastery. Don't miss the day. So she took them out to find a restaurant. We were invited by the Evergreen gang as guests. They ordered a table of appetizers. Then we don't know much about this gambling incident. I'll treat you to a drink after I win you wine. Has no alcohol content. Yushu said some polite words and left with Xiao Mingming. Except for Jing, this trip was considered them shared 2 cups. He suddenly pulled a long face. Not the gambling place not allowed Jing stand by at the side, but Jing bring them all back. Coming out of the gambling house, standing on the street, he does not like the backyard, and so Xiao does not afford. The soldiers came up to chase them away. After eating, drinking to their heart's spring fragrance house, they wander back to their new house. They form 2 lines. After washing in the middle, they go back to their rooms to sleep. Yushu was in the middle of the line place to set up a stall. Yushu had walked around Autumn Osmanthus as soon as she was through the window. Seeing the name of his figure Tranquility. It was not difficult for her to remember the solid Xiaoxiu waiting outside the door. Are you asleep? She frowned. Seeing that everyone had come to her as a light, slowly led the way to the west of the street. It was a brothel on the street behind Autumn Osmanthus gathered in front of spring fragrance. After staying in the new residence for a few days, Xiao was everything that was lacking was slowly replaced. They didn't dare to block the way. The kitchen was also heated up to cook. Yushu just stood at a distance and pointed. Didn't you hear what he said? Turned her head to find look around her and set up a small manual abacus stall. Xiao Mingming's face afraid that she had gone somewhere else to look with 4 wooden wheels at the bottom. She couldn't even pass a message. Not to mention that she did not have extra money. She was worried for families. Even if she had extra money, Xiao Mingming had been waiting by the side of the road. She planned to find an auspicious day to set up the stall was a troublemaker. When he saw the soldiers, she did not know what trouble he would cause if she received the recommendation letter. Xiao when he saw that they did not have enough money, he didn't see he still wanted his new residence. He hurriedly squeezed in front of the passers-by and shouted to buy another serial astronomer's mansion. Then do you have a reason to go now? Would have thought that he would leave in high spirits and walking at the very front. Tomorrow, moved his neck a little. When he returned home, today? He turned around and searched for the crowd behind him. When Yushu asked him about it, she hesitated. He saw her standing on the admission officials and waiting at the side that there's something wrong with my recommendation letter. A young man tumbled out from the side of the road and ran after her to go. It was not easy to obtain a recommendation letter, could not help, so she was not September enough to trouble him to write another. What's wrong with September? What's going on? Yushu and sat together and asked in panic and asked. Yushu looked at her disdained piece of paper and pointed to the first line. Next time you go out, she tried to say that the first paragraph. It was an officials are investigating the gambling in the south. It was September now, and today was the 20th. Xiao Mingming cried. It's all my fault. She saw that the handwriting was correct and the sentences wouldn't have been erased, and there was nothing wrong with it. Xiao Mingming returned. What should I do? She asked suspiciously. What should I do? Greeted them. Is this master Yushu heard her crying? How was it? She was so that the celestial mission begged Yushu yesterday for writing recommendation letter was also present. Doing so would attract the attention of soldiers. Master Yifang has a small reputation after dinner. Training person. Xiao Mingming let it slip. She became a master many years ago. Go back going to gamble in order to raise money for Yushu smiled coldly. If you don't see me at night, actually did not approve of Yushu gambling. She was afraid to go to the celestial commission because Xiao Mingming was deliberately did not make it difficult for her in order to gain some benefit. I found
found everything. Think of a way to
Only
see
a
me.
silly girl
I'll go
like
and have a look tomorrow.
He fished out the money
come
back
back
from his
Yushu
pocket.
sat down
And while the officer was not
paying attention,
I'll pay a visit
seeing
to
that the
Master
matter was
Yufan
settled,
tomorrow
Yu
morning.
Xiaoxiu couldn't help but
He
say,
had just stretched
sad
with
with
an
an
anger
when the
face.
officer in front
If
stopped
she
and
doesn't
shouted
pass
about
the
how she had to
exam,
lower her
pointing
voice
to
to
Yushu
Bei and
for
another
help.
gambler
She
who
was
was very
very
distressed.
distressed.
was unwilling.
He said,
No
"What
need
are you
to do.
doing?
Who do you think can't?
Yushu folded
I'm
the letter
talking
and
about
turned
you.
it to her.
That official is
Xiaoxiu
deliberately
said
making
bluntly.
things difficult for you.
You're not as good as
even if you write a
brother-in-law.
few more
Low
letters
voice
and jog
if
My
will be
brother
enough.
doesn't want to go.
Shui
But
Ru
Xiao
said
his
his
head puzzled and
Why
don't
does
have
he
a
make boarding
single
difficult
sentence for
for
me. And in the end,
He
my
lowered
brother
his
had
voice
no
to
how to
explain
explain
to
to
him.
him. So she said,
Xiao
but don't
Ming
worry
was
about
embarrassed
it.
by
I
his
have a
words,
way to help
and
you
his
sign
face
it.
turned
Brought
red.
to the
You
magistrate's
don't need to
office
go to the
after a
training
while
hall
for
for
the
the
next
next
few
few
something
days.
to say.
Just
Before
follow
they
me.
could go through
I
the
don't
court.
need you to
Xiao
worry
Ming
about
was
it.
worried that it would be
Why do you
troublesome to
care
ask
so
everyone
much
lined up
again?
to enter the jail.
After
Because there were a
hearing
lot
his
of
words,
people,
he
he
naturally
naturally
believed
believed
that
that
she would
my
solve
brother
the
will
problem.
suffer. So he agreed without
You
thinking.
soon,
The original
however,
show himself
the next day,
eating and
Yushu
sleeping together for the
when it was
past few
Yushu's
days.
turn,
So
he
there was
saw
still
her
plenty
pushing
of
a
wooden
wheeled cart
with
with a
a
blue
lucky
flag
enough
with
to get his
furthermore,
characters on it. He was still young.
Since
Since
it was
jail,
jail, to be humble.
the environment couldn't be
What are
much
you doing?
better. He was able to gain
There
the
was
upper
no
hand
bed
wasn't
or chair,
arguing when
only
Xiao
a
pile of
the
hay in
stall
the
and
corner.
banner
Yushu
the day
was
before
annoyed
yesterday.
by the two of them. Since they
There
were
was
in
a
a
small
small
iron
iron
cage
cage
between
between
each
each
of
of
them
them
slap on the
which was
private.
about 10 feet above
She
the
always
ground.
didn't hear
Yushu went back
the
to
light
the
shone
out
through the
set up
window.
a stall.
Jin
And many
Chen saw
carriages
this
were
and
still
going
out
to
to
set
set
up
up
a
a stall to do fortune
Yushu
telling
still
for each the
arguing
jailer
Yushu
sat
and
answered
the
matter
lock
of cell door
Yushu
inside.
sat at the
Let's
desk,
hurry up and
playing
get
with
a
his
beautiful
beautiful
feather
feather
that
that
small
Jing
space
Chen
Xiao
twice
Ming
and
was
sat
sitting
down
down
on
on
the
a pile of
Chen
hay.
stood beside
Setting
her.
up
The
the
other
stalls
people
in the
strings,
next cell
grinding
beating
the
chest
If you
and
won't
stamping
go,
their feet
go
in
by
regret.
yourself.
Can I go with you?
Alas,
I don't want to
her law
embarrass
Yushu
him
looked
of
at the
calamity
paper
was
and
good at
tilted her
everything.
head to look at
But he
his
couldn't
snorting.
predict Chen.
What's
so embarrassing
Although
about
being
six
late
lines,
she
she remembered
accurate.
the time
She
when
had to
Jing
ask
wanted
him
to go
before
to
she could
G
answer.
family's Bower
If you don't
Casino.
go,
How could
win
she
money,
have
I
thought
won't
that
care
she
about
would be
the
in
jail.
registration? She did
Now,
not
you
expect
cannot
to
only
encounter
did she not
someone
ask
for
for
another
another
recommendation,
but she was
letter.
also
She was
disgraced.
moved.
Let's see if
so
they
she
will let
mentioned
you
her
really
past
suffered a
action.
double loss.
A few months
Hearing
ago,
this threat,
we met in
Xiao
the
hugged her
hugged
struggled
knees
in her
and buried
heart.
her
At
face.
that time,
She
one of
was
my
too
elders
shy
she
to sit
seriously
seriously ill
ill.
and
She
needed
remembered
money.
that
She
the
was
guy
afraid of
glared at
delaying
I went
the
to the casino
registration
to win
brothel.
money.
Yushu
She
didn't
I
have
was
time
afraid
to
that
wait
they
about
would
her.
embarrass
That
me.
look.
So I
She
specially
said,
asked
ever
you to be
since
my
my marriage
bodyguard.
between the
Protect
T
me.
family and the
You
Schwa
don't have
family
to
was
remember.
ruined, and she was kicked out of the
Xiao
Chu
Xiu
family.
tried hard
She
to
never
recall,
thought
but
that
she
she
had
had no
medicine.
impression at all. On her
You
way to the
stay at
capital,
home
shook his head.
guard the
Wasn't
door.
that she couldn't remember him,
Xiao
but
Ming
that
Ming
she
saw
saw
that
that
he
he
couldn't
couldn't
put the
remember
flag on the
anything.
cart.
She
He
remembered
went out
smiles
with
and
no
looked back at the feather in her hand.
She really
didn't want to care.
She did not
intend
intend to tell Jing
She was
that at
anxious.
that time.
She was
That
thick-skinned
kind of
and
relationship
later
had been chased
and he
after her,
agreed to
which
accompany
made her
her.
unhappy
Early in
when
the
she
morning,
thought about
unlike
it.
there were a
Now,
lot of people in
she
Audiobook
still
clearly
asked.
remembered that day at the Schwa
Yushu
family's
touched
guest
the
house.
stall
She could
and
not
he
for a
deliberately
long
changed
time
her.
on the street, and she
50
smashed
taels
she
of
found a
silver
place
in
in
the
the capital
capital
before
was
yesterday.
the
That
last
was the last
time
time
they
they met. And it
There
was
were
also
many
the
reasons
reason
why
why
she
she
couldn't
couldn't
get
get
over
over
him.
him.
But
As
no
long
one
as
set up
she
a
didn't
stall
like to
to
owe
her.
people favors,
She would win
she was
and
not
lose
afraid of
tomorrow.
occupying other
Someone.
people's
She
places
hadn't
and
paid them
causing
back
people
to
to
feel
feel in
comfortable.
silence.
Letting Xiao Ming
Otherwise,
watch
it should
the
not
stall
cause any
be a
trouble. She
lump
went
in
into
her
the
heart.
tavern to
She
greet the
calculated
tavern
it was
for herself
fine if she
last
didn't
night.
remember
After
it.
all,
But once
there
she
were only
did,
advantages
she would feel
and no
uncomfortable all
disadvantages.
over.
The
From the
tavern owner
chapter
was
one
an old
here to
man
500
500
years
Sunday.
later.
On this
After
day
all
in
these
he had a
years,
gentle temper.
Xiao Ming
was
was
the
the
first
first
one
one
to
to
wake
wake
up
up
Xi.
When
Yushu
she first
pointed
pointed
out
out
knocking on the
door
door of the tavern,
she
the guy
slowly
had just gave her her
she
first
said that the
job.
pot of
She
flowers was
slowly got dressed and went to the other side of the screen. He was the one who pulled she made the old man look at her when she was in jail and needed to protect herself. She went outside. He was the one who Xiao Mingming followed behind her. She said, regardless of whether she was to the capital to study personal favors, even when she went to the bath, enough food she waited outside. So he went out to earn some pocket. However, she had nothing to restrain outside, so she could not forcefully over him. He won't hinder your business. It was not until she saw my turn in the tavern and now she was there to cook that she could not help. She then took out the barometer that she wasn't sure if he would help her again after such a long time. You don't need to pay to eat outside. She was afraid that he would help her again, but I have some knowledge about if she still owed him favors. She would rather carry the small pot or basin or stay out half of the jar of rice. If the tavern owner has just as she was thinking like this, as long as it's related to feng shui, prepared to cook a sweet wine. I can help you. She missed a meal in the middle of it. There's no need to be polite. A few days ago, stomach was growling. How could he not respond to her words? Tavern owner sat up. She wanted this young man stretched somewhat numb, but because of Xiao turned around to look at the sky outside the window. There was a stall in front of the tavern. Soon, perhaps she didn't know if Xiao Mingming went home or if he didn't. He modestly agreed and ordered the waiter to she slept in jail for a few days. Xiao Mingming she was afraid he would send it outside and others would be to quench her thirst. Her big eyes were hilariously behind her.
Because she was worried that she would miss this opportunity standing by someone's side of the cart well for the past 2 days. He didn't know whether to sit or stand. Yushu scooped out half to bury his face. There were 2 jailers standing in the corridor. She laughed. She then poured the rice and there was another the pot and covered it with a lid. It was the leader of the officers and soldiers she saw during the day. She opened the hidden compartment below the cart and took out a letter home and asked your family to pick you up. She opened it to the side and said, all the money you owe me. And then she also took out a ignorant and asked, a turtle shell, we're still in the mood to joke with me. Are you going to let us out? Ink and an abacus. If I tell you to come out, one by one, come out. She's joking with you. Why are you talking so much nonsense? She unrolled the banner and the house to get the handle of the small cart. She made a series of calculations and soldiers patted family shoulder and said to Yushu on the back, I'm not letting you go. From the time you jumped off the boat until now, he couldn't help but travel expenses and daily food and lodging with her say, oh me this whole 89 taels and 67 around when Yushu heard this, what's so funny? I've recorded it all, tell me. Including really said, I'm laughing at how arrogant you tails and 42 copper coins. If others see that, they'll think it's a small change and counted as 127 cents. She rolled her eyes whether I'm boasting or not. If you dare to not clear my heart, she cupped her hands and said, I'll knock you out if you want to interrogate me. If it wasn't boasting for the wrong person, called an advertisement. This is my first time there were new customers every day at Automos. You can sell it for at least 180 taels. Yushu and if I can't get Xiaoming angry, then I will be slapped away Yushu's hand. One was energetic and the other was because she often made fun of him, setting up the leader of the officers and soldiers was sent by Shuai to take Yushu away. Don't mention 100 taels, seeing that Yushu really possibly die in exam. He thought she was afraid of being interrogated. People who asked for fortune-telling usually preferred to believe no matter what he said. Yushu was still unwilling. There were also people who wanted to join because Shuai had told him before. Not long after Yushu was very angry with Yushu. Someone came up to them. So she hugged the abacus and asked the jailer to lock the cell door. As soon as someone came to Yushu saw a neatly dressed little brother walk out. Yushu let out a sigh of relief. It just so happened that the rice wine in the pot was ready. This person looked like a burly man. She leaned her back against the wall. She said, "If I don't come back at noon, Yushu didn't stop people by their appearance. The cold couldn't tell if he was angry or very tasty." She curled up on the haystack so it's very comfortable to eat. My family was remember not to let the shop owner add the loaf chains. Are you here to entirely open her eyes? Yushu filled 2 bowls. Her vision was blurry for a moment. Originally, she saw a pair of capital was very lively in the edge of the bowl. She retracted her hand and didn't know about the yuan examination. He looked at her for a moment, then his hand brushed her head and picked up a piece of dried grass. Yushu saw that he wasn't afraid to smile, so she simply left the 2 bowls for him to care. You want me to personally invite you out? She washed the spoon and went back to the room to wake Yushu up. Before if it's going not accurate, Yushu once chapter 159. Yushu's last sentence made so arrogant she burns about me to personally invite you out. A knife, an abacus, never thought when Shuai would personally come to the prison. Except for the secretly rolled his eyes behind Yushu. 2 of them parted on bad terms. It should be known she looked in the mirror and changed into her best to say that they had broken off their relationship. She used the bottom of the pot to make her eyebrows and the third blacken her sideburns. Even if he helped her out, then write down your horoscope. It would be enough not letting found a pen she can follow. Yushu brought Xiaoming no reason for him to get close no matter what. They were working now that he was in front of her. She let them wait. It was not up to her because he wasn't a rich person. At the very least, there was no need to hide his eyesight. Something wasn't easy. Yushu took it and the 2 of them went torches in the corridor of the prison. When they arrived at confusion and bewilderment. The sun was already high. When the man saw this, his face was full of 2 streets and found spring this little girl was usually shrewd. There weren't many customers in the brothel. She was nodding a hand and pointed at the fair and clean-looking women sat and she smiled and said, "Eating melons, isn't it hurry up and get up." In their hands were fragrant wonderful foresight. And when they saw people pass away, stood up and not foresight. He took their steps didn't reveal their shadows. It is a wonderful foresight. Their pink and green colors clearly showed that they weren't from good families. If it is not a wonderful way, then it is not a wonderful where this spring fragrance brothel was. When the man heard Yushu muttered and got up, he knew where it was. Because of the black dust from her body, then followed behind him back to the side of the road. They didn't speak a single word all along the way. He lowered his behind Yushu. After exiting the prison cell, Yushu used the horoscope to find the location of the life and death door for the man.
an in.
Yushu heard a few words, especially addressing Shui and adjusted her collar.
Instead,
and she wondered what official red hair from a hidden drawer
"Wait
and
for
cut
me
his
outside."
He had such an imposing manner
She
and
signaled
the
the
man
man
to
to
stretch
look
out his
food
hand
nearby.
and tie it around his wrist.
I'll
The
be out
Imperial
before
Court
dark
examination
was
was
in
in February.
February.
And said,
With that,
today,
at
she
that
walked
time,
across he was
street.
still in Yang City.
500
Xiao Mingming didn't
steps.
even
It
have the
seemed that
chance
his
to
official
stop
position
money. Was not a normal one.
She
Remember,
watched helplessly
as
as
she
she
was
was
ushered in
with
family's
family's
influence. In the
It
blink
was
of an
said
eye,
that
this
this
Schwab family
family
had a
disappeared.
very high status in
She
her
knew
heart
that
that suddenly
Yushu
felt
was very
empty.
good at
Otherwise,
determining the
when a
position of the
housekeeper
8
came to
doors.
Yang City,
Because when they left
the
the forest
family
by the
would not
river,
have to
they
personally
relied
pay
on
their
her to lead the
respects
way
and bow
using
to
the
him.
8 doors of life and death.
Yushu looked at the back of
But what did this
Shui
red
head
rope
and
mean?
secretly curled her lips.
The man saw Yushu's
Other
serious
people were the
expression
children
and
of
grinned.
officials. The corner
She
of
did
his
not
mouth
know which
moved up and
generation
down.
this brat was.
He said,
How
"After
would I
all,
know if this
the
method
prison
of
door
yours
was
is
a place
accurate
where
or not?
prisoners were locked up? I still have to
There
try.
was a
remote street outside
It's
the door,
not good to pay
and
now.
it was very deserted. What if it's not accurate?" A single carriage was parked at the
Yushu
side of the
waved
road,
her hand and
the
said,
jailer sent
"Big
them
brother,
to the door
just
before
go."
asking for permission to return.
I said that
you can't leave without
Yushu
paying.
watched
Shui Rui get
Whenever
on the
you
carriage,
come back,
and she
it will
hesitated
count.
as she didn't know how to speak
Very
and bid
good.
farewell to him. If I really find
Although
a way
this
to
would be
make money,
suspected of
I
burning
will
the
come back
bridge
to
after
thank you.
crossing
it. She really
man
did not want
touched
to
the red
coexist
rope
with
on
him.
his
wrist and said a few
As
words
soon
to
as Shui
Yushu.
Rui
got into the car. Then he
opened
opened
the
the window
way
and looked at Yushu.
He was indeed
standing
heading
there
towards the
motionlessly.
west.
He
It
knew
seemed that
exactly
when he
what
reached
she
the
was thinking.
south,
He still had
his
to make
finger
a turn.
tapped
on the windowsill. Those who ask for
Without
fortune
waiting
telling
for
would
her to
rather
say
believe it
anything,
than not. He said, "Come on
As
up."
soon as the man left,
It's late. Xiao Mingming complained to Yushu in a low voice. "That person is obviously here to
I'll
make
send you
money.
back
first." It was
But
so
you,
dark that
saying
Yushu
that you
really
won't
wanted
accept
the
to go
money
home
because you
alone.
can't predict it correctly.
She might get lost.
This
but
is
she heard him
exactly
say
what he
that he
wanted
wants.
to take her home instead
Even
of
if he
somewhere
can
else.
predict it
correctly. Why would he
heaved a
come
sigh
back to
of
give you
relief,
money? Got on the carriage
Yushu
and
rapped
told the
the red
coachman the
rope
name
and
of
said
the place.
optimistically,
"I am not
But
anxious."
as soon as the carriage started moving,
"Why are you
she
anxious?"
regretted it.
"What
Tell
business
me,
are you doing? Why did you come to Anling?" The first few days
Shui
will be a
Rui
loss.
crossed his
long legs and looked
It's
at Yushu
not like you are the
calmly.
reincarnation of the god
He said
of
that he
wealth
wanted
who
to
can
make
send
money
her to the
just by
hospital,
stretching out
but
his
he didn't
hand.
say that he wouldn't chat with her
Xiao
for a
Mingming
while
could
in the
not win
car.
against her in an argument.
Shui Rui waited for a
She
long
could only
time,
suppress her
but
anger
Yushu
and asked
did not
again.
reply.
What's the use of wrapping
She
the red
lowered
rope
her head
around
and
him?
played with her fingers as
What
if she
kind
did
of
not
saying
hear
is
his
this?
question.
Are
In
you saying that
reality,
the 8
she
doors
was
with the red
pretending to
rope
be
will be
mute.
more accurate? If it was any other
Yushu
time,
put the red
he
rope
would
back
patiently
and held
wait
her
for her to
chin
speak.
with one hand.
But not
She
today.
turned her head and winked at
The
him.
road
It's
was
useless.
so long.
After
After sending her
said,
there,
then why
he
did
had
you
other
give it to
things
him?
to do at night. It's not practical
All right,
to just
let's
use your
not
mouth.
ask about this.
What can you give to
Let's
make
talk
people
about
believe
what
you?
happened today.
Xiao Mingming
Shui
thought for a
Rui
while
changed
and
the
understood.
topic.
There
She
was a
looked
hint
at her
of
with
mockery
disdain.
in his tone.
You said it so nicely.
I thought
but
you were
just
smarter
trying
than
to be
anyone.
mysterious.
Today, I know that there are times when you are dumber than
Chapter
others.
150.
You went to the
Yushu
Evergreen
used
Gang's
the
territory
excuse
that
to
she
gamble.
wouldn't accept money if she couldn't
Do you know
predict
how
the
much you are
future.
worth?
In the morning,
You don't even
only
know when
3
you are
to
being
5
sold.
people stopped by their little
Hearing
divination
this,
stall.
Yushu raised her head
Whether
and
it was
looked at him
asking
with a
for money
frown.
or asking about misfortune,
She felt that something
they didn't
was
earn
amiss,
a single cent
so she
business
didn't
was
mind
bleak.
his teasing.
She
Xiao
turned her
Mingming
head
spent
back
most
and
of their
thought
time
back to this
sitting there
morning
like
at the Spring
decorations.
Fragrance Brothels casino.
When it was noon,
Just
Xiao
by
Mingming
thinking
made
about
a
it for a
fuss
moment,
and wanted to go
she
back.
felt that something was amiss.
Of course,
There
Yushu
were
didn't
30
ask her to
people
leave.
gambling together. She gave her a
Why did
piece
the
of
person who
silver
spent
and sent
money
her
to
to
pick
buy
the
a
numbers
stallion
choose her?
pancake to eat. He bet 400
Lunch was
taels
just
on
like
4
that.
questions. In the
It
afternoon,
was not because
she
he
was
was
confident
confident
in the
divination
questions,
readings,
but because he thought she was
When
a
it was
weakling.
almost dusk,
Even if the
Yushu,
gambler
under
who came
Xiao
up with the
Mingming's
question
urging,
wasn't a member of the
unhurriedly
Evergreen
closed up
Gang.
the stall.
He was definitely
When
related
she
to
got
the Evergreen
home,
Gang.
the sky was still dark.
He probably planned to pick
As
a
soon
newbie
as she
to
entered the
scam,
door,
so he
she
tampered
smelled
with the
the
card
smell of
selection
medicine.
part.
Yushu
She had thought
called
that
out
she was
and
just a
heard
blind
Xiao
cat
Shou
bumping
entering
into
her
a dead
kitchen.
mouse. She asked
She wanted
Xiao
to win
Mingming
their
to push
money,
the car
but
back
it turned
into the
out
house
that she
and
had
went to the
already
West
been
Room
cheated
to find
by them.
Jingqin. No wonder
There
the
was a
2
soft
judges
straw were not willing to help her solve the problem. The door was half open,
group of people were
but
all in
Yushu
cahoots.
still knocked on the door twice to go in.
She just didn't know how many of the
What
30 people
surprised her
had been
was that
cheated like
Jin-Chen
her.
wasn't lying on the bed.
Shui looked at the annoyed expression on her face
he was sitting at the
said,
table in front of the
9
window,
out of 10 gambles
writing.
are scams.
When he raised his
As
head
long
and
as the
saw
word
her come
gamble
in,
is
he held the
involved,
brush in
there
his
is no
hand
such
and
thing
smiled
as a
at her.
scam.
His
Why do you
expression
think
was very
gambling is
pleasing
banned
to
in
the
the
south
eye?
of the city. Yushu looked at him
Gambling was
openly.
originally a game for traders
She
to
walked
compete
over
with
and
each
stood
other
at
in
the
their free
side of the
time.
table.
She
Occasionally,
asked,
there would be
"What's
some
wrong?"
bets, and later,
I
it was
asked the
used
doctor
for
to take a
profit.
look.
Amling
Did
is
he
the
say you're
capital of
better?
the world. Jing Chen
People
nodded.
from all walks of life come here.
He took a clean piece of paper and wrote on it, "It's a new prescription.
Since they can't go to the
I
north
bought
of the
half
city,
a month's worth
they
of
gather
medicine.
in the south.
I just drank
Because
it.
they are hidden in the market,
Yushu
it is
lowered her
difficult
head
to
to look at
them.
the table.
Thus,
She wanted to see what he was writing just now,
common.
but she saw a piece of paper beside his
there
hand.
have been people using gambling
What
as a
was written
pretext
on
to
it was
trap
not
traders
words,
and use
but
gambling
drawings.
debts to threaten them.
She let out a
What
soft
you encountered today
sound.
is exactly such a scheme.
She took a closer look and
Among
saw
the 30
little
gamblers
things
squatting on the
other than
windowsill,
there are 2 others
it
who
was
came to the
black and
capital
white.
for the Dian festival.
Kim Bao jumped out
If
of the
you are
paper
caught by
and
them,
naughtily
you will
jumped
have to
down.
work for them in the future,
Although
and it
it
will
was
be
not a
difficult
proper
for you to
painting,
escape.
The ink color was well
After
proportioned,
listening to his
and the
detailed
movement was
explanation, Yushu felt a
It
little
made
scared.
Jean Bao look lively.
Then she remembered that it was
Yushu
because of
liked
him
it
that
and
she was
asked
able to
Jing
get
Chen
out of
for
trouble
it.
this time. She took it back
She didn't
and
want to
pasted it
owe
on
him
the
a
inside
favor,
of the house,
but it was too late.
It added some
She felt
interest
the
to the bare
trust,
walls,
but
still thanked him. Yu Xiaoxiu cooked the
Fortunately,
porridge.
you led people to that place.
Yushu cooked
Otherwise,
2
I
hot
would have been in
dishes.
trouble again.
Her cooking skills
you.
were average. Shui Rui
She only
smiled,
made some
changed.
home-cooked dishes.
He clasped his
However,
hands on his
Jing
knees and
Chen
said,
and Yu Xiaoxiu
"Now,
weren't
can you tell me
picky.
how you came to the capital?"
Xiao Mingming didn't want to be
Yushu
picky
sighed.
because he was eating plain rice.
This was why she hated
The
owing
2
people
dishes
favors.
and soup were enough for the 4 of
She
them.
couldn't refuse him confidently.
There wouldn't be any
so she could only
leftovers.
answer honestly.
After
I
dinner,
offended the Ji
weather
family
cooled
and
down.
couldn't stay in Yang City.
Yushu asked Yu Xiaoxiu
I was
to bring
afraid
a
that I
chair
would
to the
cause trouble
courtyard.
for others, so I left
She brewed a
Shangjing
pot
to
of
make a living.
chrysanthemum tea.
Shui Rui
The 4
certainly
of them
knew
enjoyed
about
the
the grudge
cool
between
air under the
Yushu
moonlight.
and the Ji family. He
Jing
also knew
Chen
how
and
she
Yu
offended
Xiaoxiu
the
listened
Ji
to Xiao
family and
Mingming
had to
talk
leave.
about how Yushu read
A
fortunes
few months
for
ago,
people on the street
in
for
Yang
free
City,
during the day.
he was there when she went to the
Yushu
county
leaned
yamen
on
to
the
beat the
chair
drum
and
and
looked up at
complain
the
about her
stars.
grievances. From time
He
to
saw
time,
with his own
she would
eyes
chime
how
in.
she viciously accused the
Only
Ji
when
family.
someone yawned did they go back
Even
to their
now,
rooms to sleep.
it was still vivid in his
No
mind.
matter how reluctant Xiao
It made him
Mingming was,
realize that this
Yushu
fake
still
young man
woke
in
her
front
up
of
the
him
next
was not
morning.
as kind and honest as
There
he
aren't
looked.
many people. Yushu saw
Even if
that
I
Shui
go,
Rui
I'll
didn't
just
say
sit
anything
there.
and only looked at her.
It's such a hot day.
She felt a little uncomfortable.
Why do you want me to go?
She shifted her
Xiao
body
Mingming
and
complained
coughed.
as she put on her clothes.
She looked up at the swaying orange
Yushu
lampshade on the
grabbed
roof of the
comb
car and
smoothed her hair.
expressionlessly said, "At that
She
time,
said,
I'm
what if
sorry.
someone wants to read the fortune of
Shui
marriage?
Rui hesitated for a
I'm
moment
not
and
good at
asked,
it.
"At that time,
Let's test your knowledge of
When?
the 6 lines.
Yushu didn't know
The
if he
few
was
things that
deliberately
Yushu
playing
could
dumb
show
or
were
if he really
arranged in
didn't
order.
remember. They were the
She
prediction
pursed her
of the
lips
time
and
of
dryly
calamity,
said,
the
"At a
weather,
Yang
the
guest
position
house,
of the
when
8
I hit
doors of
you."
life and death.
Oh.
As for feng shui,
Shui Rui's
she had
eyes
learned a
moved.
lot and lacked practice.
He narrowed his eyes
so
and
she
looked
didn't
at
know
her.
much about it.
Why are you saying
As
you're
for
sorry?
the astrology, it was
He
related
thought
to
that
major
when they met
events.
again, he should be the one
Xiao Mingming
apologizing
had
for
learned
his
a lot from
excessive
Yushu.
behavior that day.
It was not
He
good to
didn't
burn
think
the
that they would
bridge
meet
after
again
crossing
after
the
that,
river.
so he didn't expect
She
such
swallowed
a
her
scene.
dissatisfaction and
He should
followed
be
her
happy
out.
that she pointed it out first.
Outside the same wine shop
At
as
least
yesterday,
she didn't misunderstand his
Yushu first went in
intentions
to
at
chat
that
with
time.
manager Sunday.
But when he heard her
Then
say
she
it
came
so
out to set up her
directly,
stall,
without the shyness and fuss
Most
of a normal
likely,
girl,
the person
he
who
felt
did
a
free
little
fortune
strange.
telling at her stall yesterday
Yushu
went back
thought
and
that he was
mentioned that there were a
pretending to
few
be
more
confused.
customers today. She
What was
snorted and
interesting
touched her
was that
ear.
all of them were housewives who were short on money. She
None
said a
of them
little
had any
awkwardly,
plans to
that
spend
day,
money.
You deliberately
But
said
there were
those
still
strange
many
things
requests
to
for
provoke
fortune
me.
telling.
You even,
When it was almost
cough,
noon,
I didn't
another
see it at
auntie
that
with the
time.
surname he came.
I thought you really
She
wanted
said
me to
that
be
her
your
son had
concubine.
accompanied her daughter-in-law to
I
visit
even
relatives.
accidentally hit your head.
They were late for a few days
I'm
and
sorry.
did not return.
Honestly
She
speaking,
wanted to ask
when he said
Yushu to
follow
see if there
me,
had been any
it really
accidents
scared
on the
her.
road.
That
Yushu
serious
took her
talk about
sons
wanting
and
her to be his
daughter-in-law's
concubine
birthdays.
caused her to misunderstand.
After calculating and seeing that there was
Otherwise,
nothing
she
wrong,
wouldn't have been
she
unable to
comforted
see
her.
that he was
Auntie,
putting on
don't
an
worry.
act.
The
She
two of them
angrily
are
gave him a
safe and
hard
sound.
slap. It's
After
probably
Shui
because
Rui
sister-in-law
heard what she said,
rarely
he
returns
knew
home.
what was strange.
Just stay for a
When
few
he
more
saw
days.
her apologizing in all seriousness
It's not a big
and
deal.
didn't take his words seriously
Auntie
in the
he half
slightest,
believed and
he
half
didn't know
doubted.
whether he
Is
should
that
cry
so?
or laugh.
Are your fortune
He held
telling
his forehead
accurate?
with one hand and couldn't
Xiao
help but
Mingming
laugh
sat
out
in the
loud.
shade behind Yushu and
Ha,
curled his lips.
ha, ha.
Xiaoyi's
What he
people
said
hated
and
this
did
phrase
that day say was indeed to provoke her. Being asked accurate but this didn't mean that he was lying. If he answered accurately, this girl, there's always a chance she could kill him. If he did not answer accurately, she was stupid, then what's the point of talking? How could she be so stupid? Yushu had bumped into her on the street the day before yesterday. As long as you keep them safe in your heart, because he was worried that she would avoid him. He didn't dare always to pretend that nothing will happen just because something happened. It turned out that she didn't take his words seriously. Yushu's words were ambiguous, and when Yushu saw him laughing for no reason, She didn't think that what she said was funny.
Then help me calculate again.
She was puzzled
when
and
they
asked,
return.
"What are you laughing at?"
Hearing this request,
Yushu put down his hand
Auntie,
and gently
I
shook
can't
his
calculate
head.
this.
He held back the smile on his lips and raised his dark eyes, stretched out her hand towards Yushu.
Forget it.
It's good that you don't hate me.
Give me the 8 characters
when
and I'll
Yushu
go ask
heard
around.
This, seeing that he didn't care,
do as you wish.
Her heart was a little happy.
Yushu handed the 8
her words
characters
and
back
actions
to her.
became a little more relaxed.
This auntie stood up and was about to leave.
She raised her eyebrows and said,
"It's
not like
I
don't hold back
his
words any
wrong.
longer.
What's there to
Seeing
hate?
that this person did not pay
you
for his
too much
fortune-telling and did not even say a word of
Shuerui
thanks,
looked at her with
he
a
coldly
smile
snorted.
that wasn't a smile.
I advise you to
I don't
save
know
a few
who it
steps.
was.
Even
Because
if this was brought
for
to the
being
celestial
slippery.
commissioner,
She secretly
no one
drew
would be
a
able
turtle
to
on the
answer.
back
of my account book
Auntie,
and wrote
he
my
was
name
about
on
to
the
leave,
shell.
but
But when she heard this,
when these
she
words
turned her
came
head
out,
back and said
Yushu
unhappily,
choked on her
"Why can't
saliva.
you all tell?" She was thinking
Why
about
can't
how
I
to
go ask
reply when
around?
she suddenly froze.
What kind of nonsense are you
This matter
talking
was
about?
referring to the time when she
My
was
legs
still
are on
working
my
at
legs.
Nianjai and he was still shopkeeper
I can go
Chow.
wherever I want.
It's none of your
Yen,
business.
He had never personally
This
admitted that
middle-aged
he was
woman's
Chao
body was
Zixin.
sturdy and her voice
But
was
now
loud.
he suddenly mentioned the past.
When she spoke, it was like
Was
she
it a
was
slip of the
quarreling.
tongue,
or
two
Shuerui
sentences
looked at her in a
attracted the
daze
gazes
and
of
roughly
everyone
knew
on the
what she
street?
was thinking.
Yushu
He lightly
secretly
sighed and quickly
apologized.
raised her hand to
"Aw,
cover
Shu,
Xiao Mingming's
at that
mouth.
time, I'm sorry."
She did not give him a
When
chance to
Yushu
quarrel
heard
with
him
her
call
and said
her
to
name,
Auntie He,
she came
"I'm
back to her
sorry.
senses.
My brother's mouth was a bit
Her
too
heart
fast.
couldn't help but feel a little sour.
You can go ask around." She imitated him and
Whether
pretended
this
to be
fortune-telling
stupid
is
and asked,
accurate or not,
"What are you
I
sorry
won't
about?"
charge you.
Seeing
Shuerui
that she
sternly
had the
said,
upper hand,
"Because of some
Auntie He
difficulties,
said in a bad mood,
I had to
"I
pretend
see
not
that
to
you
know
two
you
are
and
still
Yang.
young and haven't learned your
I
skills.
didn't deliberately tease you and
You're
make
learning
you feel
to come out and
uncomfortable.
fool people.
I'm sorry.
I advise you to go home early and not harm others and yourself." After saying this, they turned around
Chapter
and
160.
left. The passers-by
Yes,
on the
my
street
lord.
took their words out of context
West
and
6th
thought
Street.
that the two of them were trying
The
to swindle
carriage
people.
stopped, and the coachman
They
said
pointed
from
at them and
outside,
whispered to each other, but
Yushu
none of them
raised
said
her head
anything
and
good.
looked at Shuerui.
Not only did they
"I'm
not
here.
help, they were also bidden.
Please send me back."
Xiao Mingming was so
Shuerui
angry that
felt
he
a
wanted
little
to chase
helpless.
after the woman, but
He had
Yushu
already
grabbed him tightly.
apologized, but he didn't hear
She
her
only
reply.
let him go when the woman disappeared.
Even so, he didn't have
Why
the
are you
intention
grabbing
to
me?
ask.
Look,
It was
she
getting
ran
late,
away,
and he should go back after
Xiao
dropping her
Mingming turned
off.
his head and angrily said
However,
to Yushu,
when he saw
"Now
her
we
back
can't even
view as she
explain
got
ourselves."
off the car,
His heart
"What
suddenly
reason
moved.
do you have?"
He actually
Yushu
didn't
wiped
want her
the
to leave
saliva
like
on her
this.
palms on her clothes and
After
sat
a
down
slight
again.
hesitation, he got
She
up
was
and
very
followed
calm
her out
even
of the
though
car.
there was a group of people on the
It was
street
late at
looking at her.
night, and there were few
Of
people on the
course we have
streets.
reason.
The
We
shops
were
were
kind
all
enough to help her
closed,
read her
and only
fortune,
one or two
but she
taverns
wrongly
still had
accused us of
lanterns lit in
swindling
front of
people.
them.
The
Xiao
road in the
Mingming
distance
angrily
was too
swung
dark
his
to see
arm.
clearly.
Yushu casually
Shuerui
fiddled
looked
with the
around and
abacus and
asked,
said in a
"Where do you
voice
live?"
that was neither loud nor
Yushu
soft,
pointed in
"That's
the
because
direction
she's
of Weixin
unreasonable,
Street, not because you're reasonable.
It's on the back street.
She came to ask for her
Carriages
fortune.
can't go there.
If we can calculate
Shuerui
it,
raised
that's
his
because we're
chin.
capable. Let's go.
Whether she believes us or
I'll
not
send
is her
you off.
business."
If we
Yushu
can't
waved her
calculate
hand
it,
and said,
she can go
"No
wherever
need."
she wants.
It's very
The
close.
road is wide open.
I
How
can
can
go
you control
back by
where she
myself.
goes? You don't
Xiao
want me to
Mingming
know where
didn't
you
refute.
live.
Shuerui asked.
He more or less understood that she had
Yushu
caused
was a
trouble
little
by talking
embarrassed
too
that he
much.
had hit the nail on the head.
He wanted to lose his temper
She denied,
but couldn't,
no.
so he angrily said, "How can
You're
a
the
girl
most
like you walk
reasonable
at
one.
night without worrying?
I'm going back.
Shall I send you to the intersection?"
Yushu didn't stop her and watched as she
Shuerui
walked
tactfully
away.
sought Yushu's consent.
Because she had been here twice
Yushu
before.
was a person
she
who
wasn't
could be
afraid
persuaded
that she
by
would get
reason
lost,
but not cowed by force.
The wine shop's shopkeeper's son heard the
she had
commotion
just
and
talked
came
it
out
out
to
with
ask
him.
Yushu a few questions.
It was meaningless to deliberately avoid
Yushu
him,
told him
so
the
she
truth.
pointed in the direction and said,
Shopkeeper's
"Let's
son
go."
was old and had seen many
Shuerui
things,
smiled
so of
and
course
turned
he
to
wouldn't
catch up
echo
with
what
her.
others said. They walked
He
side by
comforted
side,
her with a few words,
maintaining a distance
a long
of about
journey
3
tests
feet.
a horse's stamina.
It was
and
not
time
abrupt,
reveals a
nor
man's
did
heart.
it seem distant.
If you really have
He could
the
even
ability,
use this
then
distance
don't be
to chat
afraid
with
of
her.
one or two gossips.
You and your brother are now
Stay
living
on
in
this
someone
street
else's
for a
house.
while and see a few more faces.
No, I
It
bought a
won't be
private
bad for you.
house.
He
You
then
bought a
called for
house
a
by
waiter to bring
yourself.
out a pot of tea.
Shuerui turned his
Yushu
head to look at
thanked
her
him.
in surprise.
No matter how the people on the street looked at her, no matter if there were people asking for her fortune, to that young man, she stubbornly stood guard in front of the divination booth she was seeking refuge in someone's house. A straight body doesn't fear that she had already settled down, and a hard back doesn't fear a poke. Yu Shu nodded. Because Xia Mingming had caused trouble, he didn't have the nerve to imitate sum of money to settle down. Jing Qin when he returned home. Shui Rui pretended to know nothing and asked why he returned home early. How did she give you money? He made up a lie. Yu Shu pretended that he did not know about the series of events that happened to Zhao Hui. When Yu Shu returned home in the evening, she briefly said, Aunt Hui's family property was seized in her early years. When she woke up early the next day, she didn't wake her up again. After she won the lawsuit, she got her family property back, so she gave me the money. There were only a few things that could be talked about all day long. If Shui Rui didn't know about it, he would think that Zhao Hui's lawsuit had nothing to do with her. The house. But however, now that he saw her acting as if nothing had happened, in just one night, her even almost more. Half the street had heard of a young man setting up a divination booth to swindle money from people. Yu Shu was hesitating whether to tell him about her fortune-telling stall in Chogui. She didn't see a single person asking for fortune-telling. Then she heard an excited shout from the roadside. Who specially came to this street to see who was the swindler. She turned her head and saw a figure stumbling towards her from the side of the road. When she came, just as he was about to pounce on her, a force came from her elbow and she didn't just pull her to the side and do nothing, just in time to avoid the attack. She studied the 5 elements of feng shui and arranged a row of divinations. A few steps forward and fell on the ground. She treated this messy street as her own study, out in pain, not paying attention to the outside world as she sat there for the entire day. He was a little unhappy that the person was the same as the young man in the day. It wasn't that she couldn't sit and wanted to ask Yu Shu, but that there was a rain in the evening and she had forgotten to bring an umbrella. But she glanced at him with a strange expression. Just as Yu Shu was about to reach home, gently broke away from his hand and squatted down to help the person. This rain came so suddenly that many people who didn't have umbrellas in Osmanthus Lane ran into the nearby shops to hide from the rain. Xia Mingming saw that Yu Shu was safe and sound. The wind became cold. She couldn't help but put her arms around Yu Shu's neck and was about to ask the waiter to close the windows. Patted her back. He saw 2 rare guests walk in. She didn't scold her because there were people present. Okay. Shopkeeper's son dismissed the waiter and walked around the counter hugging each other. Young Master was stunned. Are you here to hide from the rain or to drink? He was a cautious person, and he didn't rush forward to pull the two of them apart. The youth walking in front smiled and turned his head to the youth behind him. Took a few more glances at the young man. Let's first go upstairs and wait for the shopkeeper to go down to the cellar to get some wine. He snickered in his heart. Today, we'll drink. Why is it that it's fashionable for the young ladies in Anlin City to dress up as boys? The youth suddenly sneezed, shivering from the cold wind blowing, and asked a few questions. The youth wrinkled his eyebrows under her incoherent explanation. She finally figured out why she was waiting for her here. The youth rubbed his nose during the day. Xia Mingming saw Yu Shu being taken away by the officers outside. It's not a big deal. She heard passers-by saying that they would be caught easily if they gambled privately. The youth ignored his protests and took out a clean handkerchief and placed it on his forehead. Yu Shu would be in trouble because of her. Turning around, he went upstairs. So she didn't go home as Yu Shu asked. Instead, she went to the Yamen alone. In the blink of an eye, she didn't get any information and was even kicked out. And the autumn air was crisp. She didn't know how to explain to Yu Shu had been in Anlin City when she went back, so she didn't dare to go home. Yu Shu was making a living by setting up a fortune-telling stall until it was dark and happened to meet Yu Shu, who was sent back by Shui Rui. Business was poor. Shui Rui was listening to their conversation. She didn't even have a customer in the main point. On the other hand, then did he the other traders on the street would earn 1 or 2 taels of silver a day. Raise money. Yu Shu he did not know whether he should be more angry or more amused. Every customer that came would be a customer. How did you get out? She would earnestly calculate their money. I heard that you were all locked up in prison. Unfortunately, most of the questions were trivial and didn't show her ability. Yu Shu pointed at Shui Rui. The gimmick of not collecting money became the reason why the customers didn't return. A few words. In the past 7 to 8 days, he let me out. There wasn't a single customer who came back to say that she was right and gave them a red packet. Who brought people to Chuanshan House during the day. Yu Shu couldn't sit still anymore. Just now, she was panicking and only she ran out of patience now, but because she didn't have much money on hand. She saw that he was a handsome young master in embroidered clothes. Buying a house and furniture cost about 100 taels of silver. She didn't know who he was, but he had the ability to bring Yu Shu out of medicine, which cost about 40 to 50 taels of silver. Yu Shu knew she only had about 20 to 30 taels of silver left to feed 4 people, so she didn't delay any longer. Everything in the capital was expensive. She helped Xia Mingming up and said goodbye to Shui Rui. Cost 1 to 200 copper coins. She was in a hurry to go home, and that was cooking at home instead of eating outside. No need to send me off. Since she didn't have enough money, she had to think of ways to earn it quickly. Otherwise, she would be starving after a
Shui
month.
stopped her.
Shoo.
There were places to gamble in
Autumn's
Autumn's
Lane.
I can lend you some first.
It was easy to earn money.
He knew that
but
Yushu
wanted
didn't
to
dare
strong,
to try it,
so he didn't directly
she
say
was afraid
give,
that she would
but
get
lend.
used to it.
It was better for her to
hesitated.
make a proper living.
Although she didn't want to owe
Xiao
Shui
Mingming didn't
a
go to
favor,
Autumn's
but the most
Lane with
important thing
Yushu
was to help
after that
Xiao
day.
Mingming raise money to enter
Seeing
the exam.
that Yushu couldn't earn much money,
she couldn't let her
he
hope
tried to
fail
persuade
just
her,
because of
"You
her own
can't do
face.
it. Otherwise,
You should
wouldn't
prepare
her
for the
efforts
great
today
yen
be in
examination with me."
Thinking of this,
As long
she
as
was
you can
about
earn
to
100
agree to
taels of
Shui
silver and get
but
the
Xiao
celestial
Mingming shook her
commissioner's
hand
invitation
first.
card.
Ashu,
You can find
no
any
need.
trading house and everyone will be
Yushu
polite
tilted
to
her
you.
head. Why not?
You don't have to suffer on the
Xiao
streets.
Mingming bit her lips, hugged her
Yushu
arm
was not
tightly,
moved at all,
and whispered,
It's only
I
September.
don't want to take the exam.
How can we wait until
After
then?
such a fright today,
If I don't
she
go
regretted
and make
it
money,
so much
you'll
that
all
her
be
intestines
starving.
turned green.
The next day,
She woke
woke
up
up
early
early
as
as
usual
usual
and
and
went
went
out
out
to
to
set
set
up
money
her
from a
stall.
strange man.
Yu
It
Xiaoxiu
was
wanted
easy
to
to
follow
guess
her,
what was on
but
Xiao
Yushu
Mingming's
ordered him to
mind.
read at home.
In fact,
The night
Yushu
before,
really didn't
she
care
gave him
that
math
much about
problems
whether
to
she
solve.
would take the Dian exam or
Another
not.
reason was that she wanted
Previously,
him to stay at home to
she
cook
helped
for
her
Jing
think of a
Chen.
way because she was
For
desperate
this
to
reason,
take the exam.
she even taught him how to cook
Now
noodles.
that she was discouraged and wanted her to cheer her up,
she would cook
it didn't
2
matter
dishes
if she
first
didn't
and
take
let
the
them
exam.
heat them up for lunch.
No, you should
Xiao
go back.
Mingming was a freeloader who didn't have the
Yushu shook
slightest
her head
sense
at
of shame and would occasionally
pulled
cause
Xiao
trouble for
Mingming to the
Yushu.
alley ahead.
But Jing
This
Chen was
time,
too
Shui
self-aware.
didn't call out to her again.
Although he couldn't be too tired,
He watched
he
her
would never
disappear
bother
before he
Yushu
turned
and
around and
Xiaoxiu
walked back.
if he could do it himself.
As he walked,
He recalled the few months
after
he spent
dinner,
in Yang
he would
City.
even help to clean up the dishes.
Sometimes he laughed,
Sometimes
he
he
shook his
Yushu
head.
praised his paintings.
His expression
so she
was
asked
relaxed,
him to paste them
and
in
his
the room.
mood had never been so good
He would draw
since he
one for her
returned to the
every
capital.
day, either a naughty
He only
Bao,
restrained
a
his
studying
expression when he
Xiaoxiu,
arrived at
or
the
a
place
bird
where the
perched on
carriage
the
stopped.
eaves.
Every day was
where
different,
are we going now?
so that Yushu, who
The
had been
carriage
tired
driver
all
lifted
day,
the curtain,
could come home and smile
Henwu
happily.
Hall.
Yushu
So the
was
carriage
used to
drove to the
predicting 1 or 2
prosperous north of the
hexagrams for
city,
herself
where the
before
night
going
was
to
full
bed
of
every
singing
night
and
to prevent
dancing.
trouble.
As for
Last
Jing Chen
night,
and Yu
there was a
Xiaoxiu,
sign that
when
she
they
had
didn't
lost
see
money.
Yushu and Xiao Mingming
The
come
next
back
morning,
in the evening,
she only
they
took
began
the money
to feel
for the meal
nervous.
when she went out.
They wanted to go out
She
to
didn't
find
take
them,
her purse
but
with
they
her.
were afraid that they would come
In the
back
morning,
halfway,
when a few
so they
ruffians
had to
came
wait
to the front of the
anxiously at
fortune-telling
home.
stall,
She
Poor
realized
Kim
that
Bao was
losing
hungry
money
from
was
noon
not
to
referring
night,
to losing
but
money
no one
or
paid
being
attention
stolen.
to it.
Boy,
It was so
who told
depressed
you to
that it
set up
kept
a stall
scratching
here
the
to
wall.
tell fortunes?
When they were about
Do you
to
know
go
where
out to
this
find
place
them,
is?
the door rang.
This is Autumn's Lane.
Xiaoxiu, open
The
the
road
door.
on the street
We're
has to be
back.
rented.
Yu
The
Xiaoxiu
Evergreen
rushed
gang
to the
in the
door,
south of the
and
city
Jing
is
Chen
in charge
followed
of this
behind
place.
him. When he
We
opened
didn't
the
pay
door
attention
and
to
saw
it
them,
before
Yu
and let you
Xiaoxiu was
occupy this
relieved
place
and
for a
couldn't help
few
raising
days.
his voice. Why
Tell
did you
me,
come back
what should
so
we
late?
do?
These ruffians were very rude. Although
The
Jing
leader
Chen
was wearing a
couldn't speak,
short-sleeved
the
shirt.
concern in his eyes was
He
obvious.
had thick arms and a collar that
Let's
reached
go in
his
first,
chest,
revealing a few
Yushu
tufts of
pushed
chest
Yu
hair.
Xiaoxiu into the yard
He
and
spoke
asked
with a
Jing Chen
slight
to
smell
close
of
the
alcohol.
door.
When the
Yushu
four of them
knew
returned
that they
to
were
the
here
house,
to collect
Yu
protection
Xiaoxiu
fees.
sat next to Yushu and asked,
She was alone.
did something
so
happen?
she wasn't stupid enough to go
Yushu
against the
glanced at
ruffians.
Xiao Mingming. She stood up
They
and
didn't
politely
say anything
said,
on the way
I'm
back,
new here,
but what
so I don't
happened
know
today
the
would
rules of the
definitely
street.
make them worried, and
Please
Yu
forgive
Xiaoxiu
me.
would inevitably blame Xiao
May I know
Mingming.
how much the rent is here?
It's all my fault.
I'll pay it now.
Xiao Mingming didn't wait
Seeing
for
that she
Yushu
was
to help her
tactful,
lie.
the ruffian
but lowered
leader's
her head and
attitude
said,
became slightly better, and
he gave a
introduced
rough
his
account
business.
of what had happened
We
today.
collect rent on the second day of
Sure
every
enough,
month. When Yu Xiaoxiu heard
depending
that
on the
Yushu was
location,
put in prison,
the rent is also
he was
different.
shocked and angry.
This
and
place
forgot
is
to
in the
ask
middle
who
of the
saved
street,
her.
and there are many people coming
He first
and going.
glared at Xiao Mingming and said,
It's 10 taels of
Fortunately,
silver a
my
month.
sister and brother are fine.
Today is the 15th
or I won't let
day,
you go.
so you should pay 5
It was
taels
rare
of
that
silver.
Xiao Mingming didn't talk back to Yu
Yushu
Xiaoxiu.
inwardly frowned.
She grabbed the
This group
tablecloth,
of people really
and her
dared
eyes
to
were
ask
red.
for 10 taels of silver
She
a month.
knew that it was all because of
In
her,
a year,
and she
it
didn't
would be
need
more
Yu
than
Xiaoxiu
100
to
taels
argue
of
with
silver.
her. She
It
was
was enough
ashamed
to buy a
death.
house.
Jing Chen
She
looked
turned
at
her
Yushu
gaze and looked at the two sides of the Xiaoxiu's slip of the tongue. Seeing that no one was surprised by her actions, everyone seemed to be used to it. He quietly got up and went outside. It seemed that the local tyrant of Autumn's Mantis Lane was the evergreen to hold a grudge against Xiao Mingming because of this. For her purse so she slapped Xiaoxiu's back and scolded him with a smile. Only then did she remember that in order to avoid trouble in the morning, she only brought food money with her. Useless. She cupped her hands and said, "I'm really sorry, and you quarrel with a girl. I woke up late this morning and forgot to bring money. How about I pay you tomorrow? You're protecting her. Who would have thought that the ruffian leader's expression would immediately change? Nonsense again. Wait until tomorrow. You're my only brother." If you don't come tomorrow, words, then wouldn't you have occupied this place for a few days for nothing? Didn't feel good. His worries weren't
Seeing
without
the brother
reason.
and sister getting along well,
she felt like an outsider
wasn't the only place
and forgot
in the
that she
south
was
of
an
the city
outsider
where people moved.
Seeing Yu
There were
Xiaoxiu
at least a
calm
dozen
down,
other places.
Yu Shu patted him on the shoulder and
Outside
said,
of Autumn's
"Go make
Mathis
the bed,
Lane,
and
they
I'll go to
weren't
the
under
kitchen
their
to find
control.
something to eat." Often,
There
after
would be
that,
people who
she
didn't
left
want to
him
pay
and
the
Xiao
protection
Mingming
fee
staring
and
at
would
each
move
other
to
in the
another
room.
place every few days.
When Yu Shu came to the kitchen,
However,
she found
Yu
that
Shu
someone
didn't
was
know
already
about
there.
this.
There
She
was a pot on the
smiled and
stove,
said,
and
"How
Jing
could that
Chen
be?
was bending over to add
I'm not here to
firewood to the
cheat people,
stove.
so where can I go?"
His movements were not
You can
very
rest
skilled.
assured.
Seeing the
5
sparks
taels
jumping
of
to his
silver,
hands,
right?
Yu Shu hurried forward
I'll
and
bring the
said,
money tomorrow
"Let me do
morning.
it. Let me do it." After hearing her promise, the ruffian leader sneered. He didn't say a word and raised his leg to kick her little
Chapter
divination
161.
stall. The entire cart fell over with a bang.
Fong
the next day. Yu Shu hurriedly
Yesterday,
took 2
the
steps
soldiers
back
arrested
and tripped over
dozens
the
of
folding
people,
stool, including 2 Isher,
She fell to the
and they were
side of
also
the road
put
on
in
her
jail
butt.
without mercy. The ink on the stall
She was the
spilled
only
out
one
and
who was
splattered
released in
all over her
advance.
head and chest. Although Shui
Paper
Rui
was
didn't give her
scattered
any
all
special
around her,
instructions,
making her look
she
like a
knew
mess.
she had to lie low for a while.
Ouch.
After this
Yu Shu
sudden
pressed
incident,
on her thigh
Yu Shu
and
felt a
groaned in
sense
pain.
of crisis again. She was furious.
In
In the past 2 days, she had
propped
calculated
herself up
Yu
with one
Xiaoxiu's
hand
and
and
used her
used her
sleeve
sleeve
to
to
wipe the
birth
ink
using
off
the
her
law of
forehead.
the time of calamity.
She secretly clenched
She
her
made a
fists
list of
and
all the
raised her
big
head
and
to look
small
at the
events
ruffian
that she
leader.
had to prevent in the next month.
She held back her temper and
After
did
that,
smash the
she would
folding
take
stool
care of
on
her
his
relatives
face.
and friends in Iyang.
Brats such
At
as
this
Xiao
time
Hui
tomorrow,
paid
send the
Jing
money to
and
her
her
cheap
Yuan
mother.
gambling house. Although they were
If you
separated
dare
by
to
the
run
north
away,
and the
you
south
can try.
and could not be of much use,
Even if you
at least
hide
she
in the
knew
northern
what to
part
do.
of the city, we'll still
After
be able to
finishing
find you.
these things, Yu Shu felt it was time to go to
The
Chiu
head
Gui
Chinese
Fong
ruffian
to
spat
inquire
a
about the
mouthful of
situation.
thick yellow phlegm onto Yu Shu's
When the matter was
shoes.
over, she would come out
Yu
to
Shu
set up
wasn't
the
a
stall
person
again.
who could stand being bullied.
Xiao Mingming didn't need
She
to
was
take
so
the dying
angry
exam,
that her teeth
but
were
they still
chattering.
had to live and spend money.
However,
for the sake
Xiao
of making a
Mingming
living,
was in low
she
spirits
lowered her
these
head and
days and
swallowed
stayed
her
in his
anger.
room all day.
After the 3
Yu Shu
ruffians
didn't
left,
ask her
she
to write a
silently
letter to
got
her
up from the
family
ground,
at the medical center.
bent over to pick up the stall.
At dinner,
and limped
Yu Shu
around to
mentioned
pick
that
up the
she was
broken
going out the
pieces
next
that had
day.
fallen everywhere. Yu Xiaoxiu's
There were many
first request
onlookers on the
was,
street,
"I'll go
but
with
none
you."
of them came forward to help.
Yu Shu knew that if she didn't
After
bring him
picking
along,
up the broken
he
pieces,
would definitely
a
make
tortoise
trouble,
shell was
so
still
she
missing.
agreed. She
Anyway,
couldn't just throw
she
away
wasn't
the
going
2
out to
taels
set
of
up a
silver
stall
that she
and
bought
could
for
rush back
nothing.
to cook at noon.
Yu Shu squatted
After
on the
dinner,
side of
Yu
the street
Xiaoxiu
and
went
looked at the
outside
feet
to
of the
fetch water.
passers-by.
After a
Xiao Mingming
while,
helped to wipe
she
the
finally
table.
saw the tortoise shell
Yu
in the
Shu
middle
was
of the
squatting
road.
in the kitchen, washing.
Someone was stepping over it.
There was an
and it was
oil
almost
lamp on the
crushed.
stove, and it was barely
She hurriedly
visible that
bent
she was
over and
holding a
walked
bowl
forward.
and not a plate. Before she reached
Hearing
the
the
tortoise
noise
shell,
behind her,
she
Yu
saw
Shu
a figure
turned around
bending
and
down
saw
between the
Jing Chen
legs of the
standing at the door of
passers-by
the
and
kitchen.
picking up the tortoise shell.
What's the matter?
She hurriedly
Jing
reached
Chen
out
shook
and
his
squeezed
head and
forward,
raised his hand to
"Sorry,
signal her
that's
to finish
me."
first.
Her words were stuck in her throat.
Yu Shu quickened her movements.
There were passers-by passing
She
by.
washed the bowls and chopsticks
She looked
in the
up at
wooden
the
basin
basin in front of
twice,
her and was
wiped them
dumbfounded,
clean,
and placed them in the cupboard.
She never thought
Taking
that
off
she
her
would
apron,
really meet him
she
in such
picked
a
up the
big
lampstand.
city like Anling City.
He led
and
him
under
into the
such
house to find a
circumstances.
pen and paper. "Is this yours?"
Xiao Mingming glanced at the two
Shui
of them
Rui
and
handed
twisted
over
the
the rag
tortoise
in his
shell
hand.
that he had just picked up and
In
looked
front
at
of
the
the
person in
desk,
front of him.
Yu Shu took out a piece
However,
of paper and
the
handed
boy's
it to
face
Jing
was
Chen.
covered in black, so
She
he couldn't
pondered
see
a few
his face
times in the
clearly.
inkstone and asked him to
He
dip
just
it in
walked
the
over
ink.
from the street, so
When
he
he
didn't
was
see the
done,
ruffians
she
just
moved
now.
closer to take a look and
Yu
saw the
Shu
words
saw that
written
his
on the
expression
paper.
was
"Your
unfamiliar,
sword,"
as if he didn't
"Can I
recognize
have a
her.
look?" She was
Sword.
stunned for a moment, then
Yu
recovered
Shu
and hurriedly
paused.
took the turtle shell.
You mean the rusty one?
She coughed and lowered her
Jing
voice,
Chen nodded,
trying to sound out her thanks.
Wait.
She
Yu
didn't
Shu
know
didn't
if she
ask
wanted
him
to
what he
see
wanted
if he
the
didn't
sword
recognize
for.
her or if she didn't
She
want him to
turned around
recognize
and
her.
rummaged through the wardrobe.
There's no need for that.
After settling down in
Shui
Beijing,
Rui glanced at her again.
she kept the
and then
rusty
he walked
ancient
past
sword
her
and
locked
entered
it
the
in the
cavern
cabinet
behind
her.
She had
Yu
been
Shu
so
stood
busy
in the
recently
same
that
spot
she
for
had
a
a headache.
while. She raised her hand to touch the dried ink on her face.
He
didn't bother to check if it was a real antique. Realization dawned on her. She found the rusty sword at the bottom of the wardrobe. She couldn't see the figure of that person. Yushu untied the cloth wrapped around her head and bitterly smiled. She couldn't describe the feeling in her heart. As soon as Yushu took out the sword, it wasn't the first time that they didn't know each other. His meal and was dozing off at the foot of the bed. She picked up back into the closet and didn't stay on the street. The mustache on the tip of his nose trembled. She pushed the cart and left the street with a heavy heart. In the bar, took it and stroked the rusty sword with his fingers. When he turned his eyes and tried to recall that night on the through the window, when he blocked the weapons of the pirates, he held a cup of wine, the familiar feeling of his body heating up. Only when Yushu was out of sight did he retract his gaze and ask the manager's son who was doing the accounts behind the counter. She didn't disturb him and stood by his side to accompany him. Manager's son stopped what he was doing and looked out the window. Open his eyes and stare at the sword in his hand. He said, as if he wanted to see a hole in it. Wasn't it because the Evergreen gang was collecting the rent? Did you remember something? That little brother probably didn't have any spare money and was taught a lesson. Jing-Chen shook his head and walked to the table with the sword. There were many sons of heaven here, but he didn't earn many red packets. Before, he was referring to was before he lost his memory. Does manager know him? No. And that little brother's character isn't bad. She looked at Jing-Chen's confused expression and said, he specifically told me that he wanted to take the Dian exam but didn't have enough money to spend, so he came out. Yushu scratched her neck and said, ability and might be able to win 100 yuan in the first place. Normally, didn't I mention it to you before? But from the two of us know each other because you saved me before. Just outside Yang City, I was captured by a group of demon Taoists and used as a sacrifice for this sword. After putting down the silver, he stood up and left. Those people were arrested by the government. On the way, Yushu found a river and washed her face. I secretly took it away. She tied up her hair and sat alone for a while, didn't care that this sword was obtained by Yushu. Calm down before returning home. He couldn't remember anything about this sword. With the sun shining brightly in the morning, however, on the ship, suggested carrying a blanket out to familiarity with it. Jing-Chen helped to tie the rope under the wall because of this sword. The door was not closed this sword for a few days. It open. Yushu saw that Jing-Chen was very interested in this rusted sword. Heard the door open and turned their heads to see that this thing could not be used to make money, but it could help him remember something. Why are you back so early? She generously said to Jing-Chen, business isn't good. You can take it. Yushu nonchalantly placed the wheelbarrow that was missing a wheel against the wall. Suddenly felt like she was bathing in the spring breeze. She entered the house. She secretly thought that such a beautiful person was more luxurious than those famous calligraphy and paintings at home. That she was in a bad mood. After taking Jing-Chen to the door of the house, he put down the rope in his hand and followed her. Who was still pretending to wipe the table and sneered, "If you continue to wipe, the table will shed its skin." Xiaoming awkwardly turned his head and sat down in front of the simple desk by the window. What was this called? She kicked off her half-wet shoes that she washed by the river and bent her legs on the chair. Yushu walked over to the table and casually picked up the math problems that Yushu had done and stared at him for a few times. After checking a few of them, she became absent-minded and stared as he was 2 days ago. She didn't even notice when Jing-Chen came in. Jing-Chen rarely saw Yushu in a daze. Xiaoming's shoulders shook and she was always busy. Are you in such a hurry to drive me away? From the ship to the capital, she had never been idle. Yushu said bluntly, you are not going to take the Dian exam. She was always full of energy. Why are you still staying here? It was as if she had endless energy, and making people mistakenly think that she was never tired. You have been away for so long. Only when she was alone would she occasionally reveal a tired look. They must be worried about you. Just like the days when they were surviving in the cave. Your mother. Don't you miss them? At night, when they were asleep, she would stand guard alone. She pulled the dirty rag and whispered, let's wait for a few more days. Take a nap, okay? Then she would be awakened by a little movement. She knew that she would yawn and stand guard until dawn. Tell me when you are going to leave. Attention to her. Xiaoming nodded quickly and sat down next to Yushu. She had a bad temper and a small appetite. By the way, who was the person who sent you back the night before yesterday? When she was embarrassed, she would look water from the teapot and answered when casually. When she was angry, she would speak in a low voice. When she was thinking of bad ideas, where did you meet a friend who could bring you out of prison? He didn't know if it was because she was the only person who knew about the past that he had forgotten. How did you meet someone here? That's why 2 days ago, with special she was not in the mood to inquire about it. He would always pay attention to her happiness and anger. She was very curious. When he saw her working hard, Yushu did not tell her much about herself. When he saw her unhappy, he would be a little depressed. Yushu's origin was quite mysterious. Even if he couldn't make her happy, not only did she know the orthodox 6 lines so that she wouldn't think about those unhappy good at everything. Yushu was clearly depressed because she was smarter and more capable than a man in the morning. Then she had a friend who seemed to be very capable. When she felt a tap on her shoulder, she turned her head and saw Jing-Chen standing behind her. Her hands were itchy. So she raised her hand and pinched one side of Xiaoming's soft palm and asked in puzzlement. She twisted it left and right and said with a fake smile, "Mind your own business." He stretched out the index finger of his other hand and tapped on the palm of his left hand twice, indicating that she was here. You take our dirty clothes was puzzled as to what he was going to do when she saw his left hand. She threw her hand away, on the ground, ignored her crying bitterly. When he opened it again, turned back to the room, was a long and feather on his originally empty palm. The next morning, it should have been dropped by the migrating geese in autumn. Because he was excited to go out with Yushu, full of luster. He did not sleep much last night. The grayish-blue color was like the sky before it rained. He would not be unable to get up the next day just because he did not sleep well. But Jing Chen dodged and flipped his palm over again. After a simple breakfast, Yushu let only saw his wrist shake slightly. Perhaps it was because of the spring fragrance brochel's arrest 2 days ago. Read, Autumn Osmanthus Lane was lively during the day, puzzlement, concealing a strange atmosphere. This time, when Yushu walked on the street, she felt that there were whispers everywhere. He let her check his sleeve again and again with a smile on his face, but she did not know what they were secretly talking about. Where did you hide it? Yushu first went to Mingyu the feather for a long time. Across the street, she had to give up the idea of exposing him. Her eyelids twitched, and after asking a passerby, she found out that several soldiers had come in the afternoon to steal the casino and arrest a few people. Jing Chen waved his hand, indicating the passerby to copy his action, then walked back to the tavern where she usually set up her stall. His empty left hand gently brushed past her palm. One big and one small hand crossed each other. She went in to talk to shopkeeper Sunday. Coincidentally, the beautiful feather was already lying not around today. There were only 2 waiters in the tavern, and one of them recognized Yushu. She picked up the long feather and looked at it left and right. She couldn't find the trick to it, so she couldn't help but ask, just talking about you yesterday. How did you make it appear? I haven't seen you set up your stall in a few days. Brush. Did you see that quickly took out a piece of paper and handed it to him? Yushu seeing him quickly waving the brush on the paper. How could that be? He gave it to her. I was busy 2 days ago, waiting for her to see it clearly. He turned around and left the room. I'm here to take a look. Yushu looked at the words on the paper and angrily laughed. Brother waiter, she hit the table and turned her head to see that Jing Chen had turned his head to look at the 2 customers drinking by the window. He must have run away because he was afraid that she would pursue the matter and led her to the counter. She couldn't help but laugh. Isn't that right? She put down the paper and gently touched the beautiful feather for the past 2 days. She thought that if she had a few more, she could make a arrested. Unconsciously, she forgot her previous worries. People to gamble, and they've been investigated by the window shown on the paper beside her hand. The notice board at the end of the street only posted the announcement written on the paper. I won't tell you. I'm sure you haven't seen it yet. One of the wheels of the cart was broken. I heard from the shopkeeper that the government has issued an order to strictly crack down on gambling in the south of the city. Anyone who participates in gambling will be arrested and locked up for a few days. She wanted to see if she could fix it. If it's serious, but after a long criminal record with the government and will never be allowed to take part in any examinations. She couldn't help but praise the dexterity of the ancient craftsman. It's that without a screw, they could still put the wheel on the axle. The waiter secretly curled his lips and said in a low voice, and Jing Chen finished their work and came out to see Yushu knocking around the cart. But we're not allowed to gamble in the south of the city. They walked over. Why are the people in the south of the city so inferior? Yu bent down and pointed at the wooden wheel that had fallen to the side. Yushu didn't respond. I pushed a rock on the way and tripped. She only smiled and chatted with him for a while before saying goodbye. She was distracted and the hammer hit her finger. Brother waiter, thank you for telling me. It hurt so much that she stood up abruptly with a hiss. Please pass on a message for me. She shook her finger twice and the hammer fell from her hand again. You're not staying for a drink. Ouch. Maybe another day. Yushu cried out in pain. Yushu was short on money. So how could she waste it and jumped on one leg? The waiter was about to go back to work when he touched his head and remembered to support her. He called out to Yushu, who was walking to the door. Quick, check if it's bleeding. Yusheng, wait. Yu Xiaoxiu said anxiously. Yushu turned around. Although Jing Chen couldn't speak, he also looked at her with a worried expression. And said, I almost forgot. Yushu gasped and pointed to her head. In the 2 days that you weren't here, someone was looking for you. He came to our tavern and asked about you twice. Hurriedly helped her back to the house to check if her foot was injured. The first person Yushu thought of was Jing Chen wanted to follow them but was blocked just as she was about to ask him in detail. The waiter pointed behind her and said, he said perfunctorily, Brother Jing, look, can you check if the cart can be fixed? This is the person who was looking for you. He then closed the door to prevent Jing Chen from seeing Yushu taking off her slippers and saw an excited man standing at the door. Jing Chen looked at the closed door and stood for a while on the corner of his mouth. When he didn't hear any more cries of pain from the house, but not the person she thought he was. With Mr. Yu missing, I found the cart was tilted to one side and was on the verge of collapsing. Yushu saw hundreds of faces a day on the streets of Autumn Osmanthus Lane. He glanced at the edge of the table and saw half a vague footprint. So she asked suspiciously, He frowned and raised his hand to measure the size of the footprint. Mr. Yu, have you forgotten? He was deep in thought. That day you showed me the way to money and tied a red rope for me. Yu Xiaoxiu came out of the house man at the door said as he stretched out his left hand and rolled up his sleeve, revealing the faded red rope on his wrist. He asked, Big Brother Jing,
you fix the cart.
Yushu suddenly remembered and
Jing
pointed
Chen
at
nodded
him.
and pushed the cart to a shady place.
When he saw the door open, he went in to see Yushu. When Yushu heard
Chapter
Chapter 1 said that
162.
Jing Chen fixed the cart,
In the
she limped
Sunji
out to take a
Tavern,
look. There were a few refreshing dishes
She personally
and a pot
pushed
of
the
good
cart
wine
and
on the
confirmed
table.
that it was really fixed.
Yushu was listening to
She
Zhao
couldn't help
Qinghui
but
with
be
great
happy.
interest. She
He
patted
was the
Jing
first
Chen's
customer of
shoulder
the
and
divination
praised,
stall
"You
on
are
the day it
really
opened."
good." He
Now
told
you
his
don't need to
story.
find a craftsman to save
Yu
money.
Xiaoxiu was called in by
I will
Yushu.
cook a good dish for you tomorrow.
He sat at the table and
The
ate
next
raw
morning,
flowers. Yushu was still the first
It was
to get
no
up.
wonder that Yushu didn't
After
recognize
washing
him
her
at first.
face, she went to the kitchen
He was
to
dressed
cook.
much more neatly than when
She
he came
planned
to
to
have
cook
his
tofu
divination
for Yu
done that day.
Xiaoxiu and Jing Chen for lunch.
Zhao Qinghui wasn't originally
After
from
cooking,
the capital.
she untied her apron
His
and
family
saw
lived
Jing
in a
Chen
small
washing his
town
face in the
north.
corner of the yard.
His father died
She
early,
greeted him,
so he
"Why
and
are
his
you
mother
up so
relied on
early?"
his maternal grandfather's
Jing Chen
family
wiped
to
the
live.
water off his face and
His
gestured
maternal
to her.
grandfather's
"I will go out
family
with you
ran
today."
an escort agency for 3
Aw.
generations.
Yushu didn't
At that
understand what he
time,
meant.
he was full of youthful vigor.
Jing Chen didn't explain
Because
much.
of the death of his father and
After
mother,
washing his
he was
face,
treated with
he
disdain.
sprinkled the water on the small
He
vegetable
left home to
field
learn
in the
martial
yard.
arts. He went to the
After
kitchen
5
and got
years,
2 bowls
he
of
was finally
porridge.
able to return home.
He took them to the living
Who
room
would
of
have
the
thought
big
that
house
when he
and
arrived
waved
at the
to
village,
Yushu to eat.
he would not see his mother and
Yushu
maternal
went out
grandfather's
early.
family?
Every day
After
asking
cooking,
around,
she
he
didn't
found
rush to
out
wake
that the
Xiao
year before
Mingming and Yu
last,
Xiaoxiu
there was
up.
a drought in the north.
She only woke them
The
up before
villagers were
going
worried
out.
about starvation and the
These
escort
days,
agency's
Xiao
business
Mingming
was
often
cold.
stayed out all day.
His maternal grandfather's
Yesterday,
family moved
Yushu
elsewhere
gave
to
her
make
a
a
few
living.
taels of silver to make
He
lunch.
asked around 3 times.
After
but
breakfast,
he didn't know where they
Yushu
moved
went
to.
into the house to wake Yu
Left
Xiaoxiu
alone,
up.
he could only wander
When she came
around.
out, she saw
A
Jing
year
Chen
ago,
waiting for her
he
at the door
arrived
with
at
the
the
cart.
capital.
Only
With
then
his
did she
martial arts
understand
skills,
why he woke up
worked
so
as a guard
early.
for a large family
"You
to
want to
support
go with me to
himself.
set up a stall?"
Because he liked
When
to drink a
Yushu
few
saw
mouthfuls
Jing
of
Chen
wine,
nod,
his
she
days
didn't
were
know if she
occasionally
should be
tight.
happy or embarrassed.
That day, his
She looked
master
him up
sent
and
him to
down and
Audemars
teased
Mathis
him.
Lane to
"No,
handle some
no.
business.
If you sit
After
on the
finishing
street for
his
a
business,
day, your
he
body
wandered
won't be
around
able to
Audemars
take it.
Mathis Lane and found
If you
Yushu's
faint,
stall.
I won't have to carry you
Who
back."
would have thought that he would be able to find
Hearing
a way
this,
out?
Jing Chen couldn't help
Zhao
laughing.
Qinghui was asking for money
He felt
that
a
day.
little unhappy. Yushu
He
showed him a
grabbed
way
her
to make
hand and
money.
wrote,
"I won't be so
Zhao
weak."
Dezhuang followed it and walked southwest. After he finished
When
writing,
he encountered
as
a
if he
wall,
wanted to
he
prove the
turned,
truth of this
and
sentence,
when he encountered a
he grabbed
street,
the edge
he
of the
walked.
table and easily carried
After
the heavy cart to
500
the steps outside
he
the
looked
door.
up and saw an escort
He
agency
turned his
at
head
the end
and
of the
signaled
street.
Yushu to come out quickly
The
with his
sign hanging on the
eyes.
sign was his maternal
I don't know what to
grandfather's
do with
family's
you.
name. Yushu
How
looked
could I
at
have
him
expected
helplessly
that they
and
would
hid
move
the
to the
smile on her
capital?
face.
I've never been
She
to that
deliberately
street
said,
before.
"Okay, then
If
let's
it weren't
go
for
together."
Sir Yu's clever foresight,
But let's make
I
this
don't know
clear.
how many times I would have
If
missed
you
them.
faint, I will leave you on
Zhao
the street
Qinghui
and come
took a
back
sip
alone.
of wine and said with a ruddy
Hearing
face,
this threat,
my mother's
Jing
health
Chen
is
nodded
still fine.
seriously, as if saying,
My uncle has
"Okay."
always been strict, and when he saw
Yushu
me,
couldn't
he
help
shed
laughing.
tears.
She
Although
closed
he
the door
scolded me,
and pushed him
he
to the
is still my
side.
closest relative.
She grabbed the cart and
My
pushed
uncle
it
has no
herself.
children and has grown old
When
over
the
the
two
years.
arrived at Audemars Mathis
He has
Lane,
the intention
they
of
set up a
entrusting the
stall
escort
outside the
agency to
tavern.
me in the future.
Yushu took out a stool and
Coincidentally,
let Jing
he
Chen
received
sit
a big
down.
business the other day and
She
was
told
going to
him,
deliver
"Jing
goods to
Chen,
Shizhou.
wait for me here.
I will go buy something and come back
I
later."
left in a hurry with the escort
Yushu
team and
planned
didn't
to
have
go
the
to
time to
Mingyuan
thank
Casino
Master
to
Yu.
pay the protection fee.
I came back
so
2
she
days
asked
ago
Jing
and
Chen
only
to
came
look
to
after
thank
the
you
stall.
later.
As
any
he said
case,
that,
she
he took
didn't
out
see
a
many
banknote from his
customers all
bosom,
day long.
placed it on the table,
She
and
wasn't
pushed it
afraid
toward
that
Yushu.
someone
would come to read her fortune when
Embarrassed,
she wasn't
he
around.
said,
So
"I
she
thought I
didn't
might
tell
run
him
into you
anything
today,
else.
so I brought it with
Jing
me."
Chen obediently nodded.
"It's the money I owe
He
you that
watched
day,"
as Yushu
and the
walked
red
away.
packet Mr. Feng gave me.
When she disappeared at the corner of the
Yushu
street,
took it and looked
he
at
turned
it.
his head and placed his hands
She
on the
secretly
table.
clicked her tongue.
He didn't look around
There were
and
more
just
than
looked
20
at the stone
taels
stamped
stamped
on
in
the
front of
banknote,
him.
waiting for Yushu.
Her living expenses for the
He
next
didn't
month
look at
would be
people,
settled.
but it didn't mean that no
She
one was
laughed
looking
inwardly.
at him.
Jing
Was this
Chen's
considered
appearance was
waiting for the
extremely
clouds
good.
to disperse and the moon
His
to see
eyes
the
were
light?
clear and handsome.
20 taels was
far from being a lot in a proper trading house. He had cultivated for many years like and didn't need to wear luxurious brocade clothes. It was a very generous reward. He had a delicate temperament and his eyes didn't look at anything a coincidence. He just sat on the roadside of making money were based on karma. Passers-by rarely turned their heads to look at him. They could especially young girls who were at the age of love. If one had the fortune to make money, then they would be able to get help. Once they saw him, they couldn't help but sneak a peek or luck was about to change. The people
He was
of
just missing
were
a chance,
considered civilized.
but Yushu pointed it out.
Men and women were guarded
Zhao
against
Qinghui
each
had
other,
been in the
but they
Jianghu
didn't
for
care
a few
about
years
small
and knew
details.
that a person could not be
They
judged
didn't
by
go
their
to the
appearance.
extent of cutting off hands and
Although
feet when they
Yushu was
rubbed
young,
shoulders.
she had previous
If they
experiences
said
as
anything,
a witness
it
and
would
knew
be
of her
considered not
abilities.
following the etiquette of a
He
woman.
trusted her very much,
Since
so
Yu
he gave her a
Xiaozhen
generous
was quick,
red packet
a brave
in
young lady
preparation
came
for
up
the
to the
future.
stall and pretended to ask
Mr.
for his
Yu,
fortune.
my uncle heard of you and wanted to
Chen
meet
could
you.
only shake his head.
Zhao Qinghui asked,
Seeing that the
when do
other
you think
party
you have
didn't
time to go with
understand
me?
and didn't want to leave.
Hearing
He took
this,
out a pen
Yushu
and paper
didn't know
and
what to
started
say,
write, so she didn't rush to
because
answer.
Yushu had told him earlier that he
Instead,
couldn't write the
she
ancient
took out a
script.
few Yao coins
He imitated
that she
the
often
handwriting
used
he had
and
seen
threw them
in a
on the
book
table.
the day before and told the person
She lined
that
up
he
the
couldn't
coins
speak.
one by one and
Who would have
calculated
thought
3
that the other
times.
party would take pity on him?
Seeing that the divination was
Seeing his
auspicious
handwriting
and that her
she
children's
even
eyes
sat
were
down to
peaceful,
talk to him.
she felt relieved and said, I have time
Not
today.
long after,
I'll go with
a few
you.
more people came up.
Zhao Qinghui saw
In
that
less
she
than the
used
time
copper
it took to
coins
burn
to
a
ask
stick
for
of
divination.
incense.
There were actually
Although
3
he
or
didn't
4 people
understand
gathered
it,
in front
it
of the
looked
stall.
profound and he thought highly of Yushu. He immediately clapped his hands
Chapter
and
153.
said, Great, then we'll leave after
Yushu
drinking
found
this
the
pot of
Minuan
wine.
Casino on the west street of
Yushu
Autumn's
nodded.
Mathis Lane. She saw
It
Yu
was a
Xiaoxiu
two-story
straighten
building,
his eyes,
but it
and
wasn't
looked
as
at the
grand
banknote
as she had
next to her
imagined
hand.
it to be.
She smiled
However,
and gave
the
it to him.
signboard was
Take
bigger
it.
than the other casinos
Yu
on the street.
Xiaoxiu finally saw the
Only
number
one
on the
of the 3
banknote.
doors was open.
He
and there was
stared
an
at it
oily
for a
yellow
moment,
leather
then he
curtain hanging
grinned
from
and
the
looked at
outside
Yushu
with the
with
word
admiration.
gambling clearly written on
He
it.
folded the banknote in
As
half
soon
and
as
carefully
Yushu
put it
entered,
into his
she was
bosom.
hit by the sour smell
It
of
should
sweat.
be Yushu Lu Yun.
The hall was filled with the
She
noise
asked
of
Yu
people
Xiaoxiu to
talking
wait
and
for her in the
gambling.
tavern.
It was autumn
She
in
followed
September,
Zhao
but there
Qinghui
were
to the
people
Fu
who
and
were
escort
shirtless,
agency and met
revealing
her
their
fat
fat
back.
boss show.
Yushu was
After
sick
a
of the
brief
smell,
conversation,
so she
they
resisted
learned
the
about
urge
each
to
other's
turn
background
around
and
leave.
Then
She
was
quickly
taken
searched
around
the
the
hall
escort
and found a
agency.
man who was drinking tea alone in an inconspicuous corner. It was said
He
that
looked
Boss
like a
Show
manager,
was asking
so
her
she
to give
avoided
advice
the
on the
crowd
feng
and
shui
walked
of the
towards
house.
him.
But in fact,
When she got
it was
closer,
to test her
she
ability.
saw that the man had a scar
Because
on his
Yushu
face.
had bought a
From the
haunted
left
house
side of his
before,
forehead to the
she
side
had
of his
specially
nose.
sorted out the house studies
It
taught
looked
by
a bit
Qing
ugly,
in the past
but the
few
strange
days.
thing was that this man
Although
didn't
she
look
lacked
fierce.
experience, she had
He
a
was
unique
around 30
vision and
years
was
old
bold
and
and
looked
careful.
very calm.
The second time
Yushu
she
stopped
looked at the
and went
house,
forward to talk to
perhaps
him.
because she
Brother,
was thick-skinned
may I
enough.
ask who are you
She
looking
did
for
not
to
have
pay the
stage
rent for a
fright at all.
divination stall in Autumn's
As she
Mathis
walked,
Lane.
she pointed at a
The
few mysteries
scar-faced
in the
man
courtyard.
raised his head and glanced at
When
her,
Boss
but
Show's
didn't answer.
expression changed,
She
he
pointed
reached
out
out
something
and waved
wrong at the
somewhere
right
else.
time.
When I
Soon,
entered the
a
door
tall
just
and strong
now,
man
I
ran
noticed
over.
that there are many tripod
Yushu
seats under the wall
recognized
of
him
this
as the head of the
courtyard.
local gangsters who
They were
smashed her
originally
stall
meant
yesterday.
to calm down, but they
He
backfired
had the
and
same
became a
face.
hindrance.
Yesterday,
Boss Show's
he looked
expression
fierce,
changed,
but now he had a smile
Mr.
on
Yu,
his face.
please speak. Yushu
Brother
pointed
Hai,
to the bare
what
walls
can I
of the
do for you?
courtyard and asked.
The scarred man
Were there
pointed
trees
at Yushu.
originally planted here?
The bully turned his
Boss
head
Show
and looked
said
at Yushu.
there were originally 2 trees.
He didn't answer and just waved his hand.
Later, there were always moths,
Soon,
so
a
one
tall
tree
man
was cut
ran
down.
over. The
When
other
Yushu
tree
saw
died a
him,
few months
she
ago for
recognized
some
him as
reason.
the bully who smashed her
Yushu
stall
recalled
yesterday.
what she had learned and asked.
He had the
Have
same
people
fierce
living in
face
the escort
yesterday,
agency
but
been
now he
quarreling
had a
recently?
smile on his face.
Perhaps
Brother
they've
Hai,
even gotten into
what can
a
I do
fight
for
and
you?
injured someone.
The scarred man
Boss
waved
Show
his hand.
said in surprise.
Indeed,
the bully looked at
there were
Yushu
2
and
escorts
said,
fighting the
"Come
day
with me."
before yesterday, and one
Yushu
of them
first
broke his
thanked
head.
the knife-scarred man before
How did you
leaving
know,
with him,
sir?
The 2 of them
As he
squeezed
spoke,
to the
he
side
turned
of the
his head to
casino
look at his
counter,
nephew,
the
asking
leader
him
of
with
the
his
local
eyes if he
gangsters
had told
placed one
Yushu.
hand on the counter and said to
Zhao
Yushu with
Qinghui
a
quickly
fierce
shook his
face,
head,
"Did you bring the
indicating
money?"
that he had not.
"I've brought it."
Yushu caught a glimpse
Although
of their
Yushu
movements
was
and
still
smiled.
angry at the ruffian, she didn't
pointed
show it
to the
on her
wall
face.
and explained,
In the layout
She
of
took
the
out
house,
an ingot of silver
it is
she had
appropriate to
prepared
make up for
earlier
the
and handed it
deficiencies,
over.
and the best strategy
He
is
weighed
to
it
be
in his hand
comprehensive.
twice, then passed
This
it to the
place
waiter
is
sitting behind the
flourishing,
counter
and when the metal
said,
is flourishing,
the piece of land
it
in
will
front of Old
suppress the
Sun's
wood
tavern
energy.
is for this half a month.
According to the 5
The waiter
elements,
took the
metal
money gives
and
birth
immediately
to water.
wrote on a
Water
piece of
gives
paper.
birth to wood, and
He
wood
handed
gives
it
birth
to
to
Yushu
fire.
and took out a small piece
I
of
have
paper.
just seen that there is a kitchen that makes a fire to cook
When
in
the
your
plate of
courtyard,
cinnabar
and
was
there is a
placed
well
on the
that
table,
fetches water for
Yushu
drinking.
looked at the piece of paper with
However,
the words,
there is a
in front of
leakage of
Sun's
wood
Tavern.
energy, September 15th,
It should only
and
be
5
suppressed,
tales written
not
on
born.
it.
She didn't
Sooner or
understand
later,
what it meant.
It will be blocked.
The head ruffian
At
impatiently
first,
urged,
there will be quarrels,
"What are you staring
but
at?
after a period of time,
Sign your
I'm
name
afraid
and
there
leave
will
your
be
fingerprint."
blood.
Yushu didn't
Hearing
understand
that
and
Yushu's
asked,
words were
"What's
reasonable,
this for?"
Boss Show had
She
already
didn't know what
believed
this was
most of it.
for, so how could
His
she just
expression
casually
changed
sign it?
slightly. There is such
What
a
if she sold her
relationship.
out?
May I
I'm
ask,
asking you to sign
sir,
it. Is
so
there a way
hurry
to
up and
resolve
sign
it?
There is a way.
Why are you talking so much nonsense?
Yushu was not in a hurry to answer.
The head ruffian shouted at Yushu.
Instead, she changed the topic
Yushu
and
tilted
said,
her head
"It's
to
just
avoid
that this
his
house
spit.
has been seen by someone
She
before.
sneered inwardly.
If I casually
Sooner
change
or
it,
later,
it will
she would
inevitably
give him
be
2 slaps
suspected
to
of
vent her
smashing
anger.
someone's reputation."
She then went to ask
If
the
that
waiter
person
who was
comes
doing
to the house
accounting.
again in the future,
The
it will be
waiter was
quite
embarrassing.
easy to talk to. When he heard her question, he explained,
If there is a gap
"Write
between
your
him
name
and
at the
Boss
bottom and
Show,
leave your
it
fingerprint.
will be my
fault. That piece
Every
of land
line
will
of
be rented
business
to
was
you.
indispensable.
If anyone tries to
Yushu had
snatch
heard
your
a lot
territory,
about it in
just
Autumn's
bring this
Madness
note to our
Square.
evergreen gang. For example,
I
the
guarantee
geomancy
that you
of this
won't be at a
house was often
disadvantage.
only invited by one master.
Remember to pay the rent next month.
If the predecessors
Otherwise,
had not
this note
gone
will
and the
be
later
invalid.
generations interfered at
When
will,
Yushu
it
heard
would
his
be stealing
explanation,
people's rice
she was
bowls.
quite surprised.
If the news spread,
She
it would
originally
be
thought
thought
that
that the
the
protection
reputation
fee was for nothing.
Yushu's words
But
were
now,
pleasant to hear.
it seems that it was quite
She was
useful.
thinking for Boss Show's sake.
At least,
but
but
she
she
didn't
didn't
have
have to worry
she was
about
hinting
others
to him
snatching
that there
her
was a
territory.
problem with this house. After Yushu
It would be
signed the
best for
note,
him to find
the
the
head
person
ruffian
who had
left.
seen the geomancy for him in
She
the past
didn't rush
to
to
repair
leave.
it. Don't ask her to
Instead,
change it.
she asked the waiter about the
It was not that
Scarface
she could
man
not
who was
change
drinking
it,
tea
but
in
it
the
was
corner.
not convenient to change
The
it.
waiter was probably bored
Boss
sitting at the
Show was a
counter
sensible
early in the
person,
morning, so when he heard
When
someone
he heard
talking,
this,
he
was
knew what
happy to
Yushu
chat.
was hinting at. From the waiter,
He waved his
Yushu
hand
found
to let
out that
the
the
two
Scarface
escorts
man
behind
had
him
a
leave.
powerful background.
Then,
He
was
took
the vice
Yushu
leader
and
of the
Xiao
Evergreen
Qinghui to the
gang.
guest room in the West Room
Today,
and sat down.
he came down to patrol
To tell
and
you the
coincidentally
truth,
ran
when
into
my
Yushu.
escort agency was first set
This
up,
person's
I
surname was
specially
Su.
invited a Master E to give me
Previously,
pointers.
Yushu heard the head
Later,
ruffian call
I
him Brother
invited him to
Hai.
be a regular at my door.
His real name was Tsing Hai.
No matter if there is anything,
Listening
he
to
will
the
give me
waiter's
a
respectful
packet
tone,
every month.
Tsing Hai had been
Who would
practicing
have
martial
thought that in
arts for
July,
many years.
that Master E would
He
offend
was
someone
skilled
in
in
the
martial
north of the
arts
city.
and was a martial artist.
After leaving a few words,
No wonder
he
when she
left
saw
the
him
capital
sitting
and returned
calmly.
home.
He must
never
have
to
the
return.
confidence of a martial artist.
Therefore, I heard from
Yushu
Qinghui
wasn't
that you were
interested in
talented,
Beaver High,
so I brought you here to take a look.
She just wanted to understand the
Now,
strength of the
it
Evergreen
seems that
gang.
Mr. Yu is young, but
She
there is
asked
no
enough
harm in
questions
having
and
real
was
knowledge.
afraid that the waiter would notice something.
I would like to
So she
invite you to be
changed
a
the
regular
topic.
at our escort agency
Little
and
brother,
give me a few
where is
pointers.
the E district? What do you
I
think?
want to try my hand.
Yushu thought that
It
the
wasn't
term
that her
regular
hands were
here
itchy,
was more or
but
less
the 5
equivalent to a
taels of silver
consultant.
that she had to pay for half
She
a
would
month
only be
made her
needed if there
heart
was
ache.
something, and if there was
She
nothing,
couldn't defeat the
she would
evil
also be
forces,
paid.
but she could at least be
This
self-sufficient
job was
and
not
win back
bad.
the protection fees for the
Jing
next
Chen's
month.
medicine was almost
When
finished,
the waiter heard
and the
this,
weather was
he
getting
laughed.
cold soon.
Brother,
You must be someone
he
from
needed to
outside
add
the
more
capital.
clothes. You haven't been
Therefore,
here for
when
long.
Yushu received Boss Show's invitation, she did not hesitate. She cupped her hands and said, "Then in the future, Boss Show, please give me more pointers." Boss Show laughed and stood up to return the greeting. "It should be me asking Mr. Yu to give me pointers." Seeing that the matter was settled, Xiao Qinghui said happily, "Uncle, it's almost noon. Why don't we go to the restaurant and have a seat?" Boss Show was more thoughtful than him. He first asked Yushu, "Are you free?" Another day, Yushu said, "I need to go back and prepare a few things. I'll come back tomorrow. After I fix the feng shui of this house, it won't be too late for Boss Show to be the host." Boss Show was happy and did not force her. He asked Xiao Qinghui to accompany Yushu to drink the remaining half a cup of tea and went outside to give orders. After a while, a servant entered with a wooden tray. On it were 3 chains of silver, which was immediately given to Yushu by Boss Show. Yushu could not refuse, so she had no choice but to accept it. She could not put it on her body, so Boss Show carefully prepared a small bag to accommodate her. In ancient times, escort agencies were very popular, especially in large cities with many people. Because there were only a few people who practiced martial arts, and there were risks in escorting goods, the competition in this industry was not very fierce. Therefore, whether it was escorting people or escorting goods, the fees were not low. Take Yushu and the others for example, from Kaifeng Prefecture to the capital, the journey took half a month. That trip cost 50 taels, and this did not include the food and accommodation on the way. Fuan Escort Agency was not big, and there were more than a dozen escorts. There were only a few big business in a year, but the small business was non-stop. Business was non-stop, spending 20 to 30 taels of silver a month to provide for a single customer was still affordable. Moreover, this was much more cost-effective than going to the hall to ask for a fortune teller when they had something to do. Chapter 163. When Yushu left Fuan escort agency, it was already noon. She went to Sun Ji Tavern to pick up Yu Xiaoxiu. When Yu Xiaoxiu saw her getting another bag of silver, he was so surprised that he asked her where she got the money. He heard that Fuan escort agency invited her to be a regular customer, so even if she did nothing every month, she would still get 20 silver taels. Yu Xiaoxiu was even happier than Yushu. "Sister, does that mean you don't need to get up early every day to set up your stall?" Yu Xiaoxiu thought that 20 silver taels every month was enough for them to spend in Enling City. His sister doesn't need to work hard anymore. Why not? Yushu hugged the silver bag in her arms and said, "Do you think 20 silver taels is enough? Do you think learning is free?" Yu Xiaoxiu thought that she was talking about him, so he felt strange and said, "You can teach me. Why do I need to spend money?" In the past, Yushu told Yu Xiaoxiu that there was a master who taught her how to learn. At that time, Yu Xiaoxiu thought that she was lying to him. But after a series of accidents, he believed that it was true. He felt that with his sister's ability, she was more than enough to teach him. Yushu shook her head. "Most of the things that I know, you can't learn. You have to start from the proper books. To be honest, your sister is only a dabbler. I'm still far from being a master. Didn't we agree that in the future, we will open a DE store, make a lot of money, live in a big house, and be respected by people? We can't delay learning. You want to learn, and I want to master. How can we cook without rice and learn without a teacher? We have to go to the DE store to buy books. In the future, we also have to visit the master's house to ask for advice. A book costs more than 10 silver taels. Don't you need money for the gifts? Do you think 20 silver taels is enough?" Yu Xiaoxiu scratched his head, "But you can't earn much money by setting up a stall. It's so tiring." "Who said you can't make money? What's this?" Yushu stuffed the money bag in her hand into Yu Xiaoxiu's arms. "Now that we have a business, it will only get better in the future. It doesn't matter if we are tired. If we want to live a good life, how can we wait for money to fall from the sky? Don't you agree?" Yu Xiaoxiu held the silver in his arms and curled his lips. "You're the only one who's tired. I haven't done anything yet." Yushu rubbed his head. She laughed heartily and said, "Because I'm the older sister." In her previous life, she had done a lot of stupid things that she couldn't bear to look back on. However, there was one thing that she was still proud of 500 years ago. She was a good sister, from beginning to end. Yu Xiaoxiu suddenly felt a lump in his throat. He raised his hand to rub his eyes and put it down. He secretly tugged on Yushu's sleeve and followed her steps. He always felt that no matter how far the road was, it wouldn't be difficult to walk. With money in hand, Yushu was on the way home. She turned a corner and went to the medicine shop. She told the doctor the prescription that Jing Chen took. She bought 10 days' worth of medicine and a few pieces of ointment that were said to be very effective in removing scars. The wound on Jing Chen's abdomen had already healed, but there was a bumpy scar left. Yushu didn't see it with her own eyes, but she heard Yu Xiaoxiu talk about it. When they arrived at the door, Yushu was carrying some things in her hands. Yu Xiaoxiu walked in front of her to open the door. The bolt was not on, so it opened with a push. Yu Xiaoxiu took a step forward and was stunned. Yushu saw that he was blocking the door, so she used her elbow to push him. Yu Xiaoxiu suddenly turned his head. Pointing at the door, he stammered, "Jing! Jing! Jing, what scenery!" Yushu heard the rustling sounds in the yard and pushed Yu Xiaoxiu aside. She entered the door and froze. He saw that in the small courtyard of the Sihiyuan. His vision was filled with a white silhouette, a long sword with green light floating around it, hissing as it cut through the wind. His footsteps were as light as a swallow's, sometimes advancing and sometimes retreating. His movements were just right. He pointed the sword and drew the sword, like a flood dragon. The person wielding the sword had his hair draped over his shoulders and his expression was solemn. One moment, one could see him clearly, the next moment, it was hard to see him clearly. As he walked sideways, the ends of his hair brushed against the tips of his eyebrows. He was born with a righteous aura that was ferocious and evil. His clear eyes seemed to be able to reflect all the impure things in the world. The last ray of green light was drawn out from the sword. He turned his wrist and retracted it behind his back. He stood tall and closed his eyes. Everything was quiet, only the sound of his long breath could be heard. Yu Shu and Yu Xiaoxiu stood at the door, while Xia Mingming squatted at the door. At this point, the three of them were dumbfounded. It was Yu Shu who reacted first. She carried her bags and ran forward, excitedly shouting, "Jing Qin, did you remember?" Hearing this shout, Jing Qin came back to his senses. He looked down and saw the person in front of him. Out of habit, he wanted to smile at her. However, before the corners of his mouth could rise, he felt a burning pain in his chest. He coughed violently and there was a fishy taste in his mouth. He raised his hand to cover his mouth, wanting to cover it up, but it was too late. He saw panic in Yu Shu's eyes. "What's wrong?" "Quick, go inside and lie down." Yu Shu saw Jing Qin vomit blood. She hurriedly dropped the bags in her hands and supported him. She directed Yu Xiaoxiu to close the door while Xia Mingming went to the kitchen to get some water. Yu Shu and Yu Xiaoxiu supported the unsteady Jing Qin to lie down on the bed. They pulled his hand away from his mouth and saw that his eyes were closed. His mouth was scarlet. Xia Mingming went to the kitchen to get some water. That night, they had jumped off the ship to escape. Because he had blocked that sword strike, Jing Qin had been seriously injured. However, at her request, he had carried Xia Mingming on his back and insisted on accompanying her for a long distance. At that time, in the cave, she had started a fire, and the first thing she had seen was Jing Qin leaning against the mountain wall with his head lowered. The image of him covered in blood had lingered in her mind for a long time. She was not a person who was easily soft-hearted. When it was time to be cruel, she could be said to have a heart of stone. However, towards Jing Qin, she had a rare compassion. It was different from how she treated Zhao Hui and Xia Mingming. She treated Zhao Hui well because she wanted to repay her kindness. She was tolerant towards Xia Mingming because she wanted to benefit from him in the future. However, towards Jing Qin, her compassion was playing tricks on her. She knew that this was a big trouble, but she still accepted him. She didn't even know where that compassion came from. Perhaps it was because of Jing Chen's helpless fate, or perhaps it was because of his pure and kind nature, or perhaps it was because he had been by her side twice when she was in trouble, so that she wouldn't have to face it alone when she was at her wit's end. She wanted to help Jing Qin, but she didn't know how. She didn't have the ability to help him find the person who broke his fate, and she didn't have the guts to take the risk to bring him back to Dragon Tiger Mountain. She could only keep him by her side, pretending that she didn't see how much he wanted to recover his memory, pretending that she didn't know about his helplessness and helplessness. Yu Shu laughed at herself. She took a handkerchief and wiped the blood and sweat on Jing Chen's face. Then, she broke his blood-stained fingers and carefully wiped them one by one. Jing Chen slightly opened his eyes. When he saw Yu Shu, he was relieved and closed them again. His chest rose and fell, and his whole body was weak. After a while, he fell asleep. While Jing Chen was unconscious, Yu Shu went out to find a doctor. Because of the previous example, she specially found a doctor who knew how to diagnose internal injuries. The diagnosis was not far from what she guessed. Jing Chen's previous internal injury hadn't healed yet, so he used his internal force recklessly. His meridians couldn't bear the weight and his 5 internal organs were injured, so he vomited blood. After asking Yu Xiaoxiu to send the doctor away, Yu Shu tucked Jing Chen in and called Xia Mingming outside the room to talk. What happened? Xia Mingming smiled bitterly and said, I don't know. I was lying in the room at that time. I heard the noise outside, so I went out to have a look. He was practicing swordsmanship, and then he followed you back. Yu Shu knew that she wouldn't lie, so she gave her a string of money and sent her to buy food on the street. Then, she turned around and went back to the room to take care of Jing Chen. She had to wait for him to wake up before she could ask him if he recovered his memory or only remembered martial arts. The 3 of them ate lunch in the afternoon. Yu Shu squatted in the courtyard and brewed medicine. Kim Bao was originally basking in the sun at her feet, but when he smelled the medicine, he moved away a little. This little blondie had been eating and drinking, and he didn't move much. He had grown fat, and when he was lying down, he looked like a hairy bull. Jing Chen gave Yu Shu a lot of ink paintings. Among them, Kim Bao took up most of the space. There were all kinds of interesting and lively poses. Yu Shu didn't think it was strange at that time, but now that she thought about it, she realized that Jing Chen had put in a lot of effort. One must know that Kim Bao was sleeping most of the time, so it wasn't easy to capture his movements to paint. Jing Chen only woke up at night. Yu Shu was sitting by his bed, reading a book. The dim light was enough for him to see her face clearly. When she was quiet, she was very different from when she was talking. She didn't have those lively gestures, and the emotions that she inadvertently revealed made him feel more real. When he saw the tiredness in the corner of her eyes, he felt a little sad. He didn't know why. He lifted his hand. As soon as he moved, Yu Shu turned her head. When she saw that he had woken up, her face lit up with joy. She put the book aside and moved to the head of the bed. She asked with concern, "You're awake. Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" Jing Chen shook his head. Yu Shu put on a serious face. "Don't lie to me." Jing Chen hesitated for a moment, then raised his hand and put it on his heart. "Is it only here?" Yu Shu asked to confirm. Jing Chen nodded. Yu Shu let out a sigh of relief. "It's okay. It should be a blood clot. Let me rub it for you." Before Jing Chen could react, she stretched out her hand, pushed his hand away, and pressed it on his chest. Because his outer shirt was stained with blood, he only had a thin shirt on his upper body. Her warm palm rubbed on his chest through a layer of cloth. He didn't know why, but it didn't make him feel better. Instead, it made him more flustered. Jing Chen subconsciously pressed the back of Yu Shu's hand, not letting her move again. When Yu Shu's hand was suddenly grabbed by him, the sound of someone's heartbeat more or less called back her feminine consciousness. Her face slightly blushed. But when she thought that Jing Chen thought she was a man, she put aside the uneasiness and asked, "What's wrong? Does it hurt?" Jing Chen shook his head. He took her hand away from his chest and put it on the edge of the bed. His fingers moved a little, but he didn't let go. He just held her hand, which was much smaller than his, in case she would rub his chest again. Chapter 164. At night, Yu Shu closed the door of Jing Chen's room and came out. She lifted the heavy sword in her hand and looked at it under the moonlight. She touched the marks on the sword. During the day, she saw Jing Chen's sword dance with a green light. She guessed that it was the green embroidery on the sword. Because Jing Chen's sword move was too fast, it turned into light and shadow. At that time, she thought that it would be good for him to remember something, but who knew that he could not remember anything else and only remembered a set of sword techniques. Moreover, by a freak combination of factors, he had used his internal energy. Previously, his internal injuries had not healed, so he could not use martial arts. With this torment, he would have to lie in bed for 10 days to half a month. Remembering that set of sword techniques, but not being able to use it was no different from not being able to remember it. The gains did not make up for the losses. Yushu knew that he was impatient, so she didn't say anything. But she took back the sword to prevent him from acting rashly again. She remembered that when she confiscated the sword, Jing Chen's face was full of reluctance and awkwardness. Yushu couldn't help but laugh. Pfft. After laughing, she felt much more relaxed. Jing Chen's temperament was far stronger than she had imagined. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to live until now and still maintain his simple temperament despite having the fate of a fiend. If it was her, she would have long been filled with cynicism and become a great devil. In any case, she would only harm others and not herself. Holding the sword, Yushu went back to the house. Tomorrow, she planned to go to the Fuan escort agency to inquire about Jing Chen's internal injury. If it can be cured as soon as possible, then he can practice a few more sets of swordplay. Maybe, he will be able to remember related things. The next morning, Yushu went to Automosmanthus Square to buy things. After walking 2 streets, she found a feng shui hole. She picked 2 pots of flowers and trees and carried them to the Fuan escort agency. Zhao Qinghui and Boss Zhou were both waiting for her. There was also a chief escort who she had not seen yesterday. Boss Zhou introduced them to each other. "Come, let me introduce Mr. Yu. This is our Fuan escort agency's chief escort, Feng Chang. He is also my sworn brother." Boss Zhou patted a middle-aged man beside him and pointed to Yushu. "This is our escort agency's newly invited Mr. Yu. Old Feng, don't look at Mr. Yu's young age. My nephew was able to find his home thanks to him." The two of them greeted each other. Yushu noticed that Feng Chang's face was glowing red, his spirit was trembling with excitement, and his lower body was solid. She knew that he was a martial artist, so she smiled a little more, preparing to ask him for advice later. Boss Zhou was concerned about the feng shui of the house. Without saying much, he led Yushu into the house. Yushu asked him to find 2 strong handymen to dig out the cauldrons placed under the courtyard wall, leaving only 2 cauldrons in the northeast and southwest corners. She dug a ditch under the east wall and led it from the backyard kitchen. The water that the maidservants used to wash vegetables and rice flowed directly into the ditch outside the door. After doing all this, she measured the distance between the east and west walls and the courtyard. She placed the 2 pots of flowers and trees she brought on the 2 corresponding positions. She warned Boss Zhou, "From now on, you can only plant trees on the east and west sides of the courtyard. It is not suitable to have these 2 pots of white calamus. You must water them daily. There is no need to protect them in the cold winter. If there are any dead leaves, clean them up in time. This flower is not delicate and is very easy to raise. You need to know not to let it die." Boss Zhou nodded his head repeatedly and did not ask for a detailed explanation. This was because those who knew the basics valued their knowledge and did not like to reveal their knowledge. However, the escort was more straightforward. He pointed to the pot of calamus nearby and asked, "Mr. Yu, is this enough? I heard that our courtyard lacks wood energy. Wouldn't 2 pots of flowers be too little?" Yushu was about to explain when she heard Boss Zhou cough and say, "Old Feng, Mr. Yu has his reasons for making such arrangements. Why do you need to ask so much?" Feng Chang smiled and said, "I'm just worried that he won't do well." Boss Zhou coughed again and interrupted him. He turned his head awkwardly and said to Yushu, "This brother of mine is clumsy. He doesn't have any other meaning. It doesn't matter." Yushu waved her hand and explained generously, "Calamus is originally used to prevent diseases and eliminate evil. Making wine can avoid diseases, and burning leaves can drive away insects. There is indeed a lack of wood energy in this house, so I directed water to grow wood in the direction of feng shui and dredged the joints to solve the predicament. Boss Show can just plant trees in the courtyard later. There's no hurry. She spoke straightforwardly, and the few of them more or less understood some of it. Previously, Feng Chang saw that Yu Shu was young and looked too delicate. He was afraid that she was an embroidered pillow. Now, he felt that she was much better than those arrogant and disdainful teachers. After tidying up the house, Boss Show sealed another 10 taels of silver for Yu Shu to buy these 2 pots of calamus. Yu Shu said a few polite words and accepted it. These 2 pots of flowers cost her 5 taels of silver, so she still earned 5 taels of silver. After settling the business, Boss Show asked Yu Shu to eat wine. This time, Yu Shu did not refuse. Under Zhao Qinghui's suggestion, the few of them went to Sun Ji Tavern. At noon, Sun Ji Tavern had a few more customers. They went late and there were no more private rooms upstairs. Boss Show originally wanted to change places, but when he saw Yu Shu greet manager Sun and heard from Zhao Qinghui that she had set up a divination stall outside the tavern, he gave up the idea. After the dishes were served and they chatted for a while, Yu Shu brought the topic to martial arts. The 3 of you are all martial artists. I heard that when martial arts reach a certain level, there will be internal energy. I don't know if it's true or not. Feng Chang said, of course it's true. How can this be faked? Oh. Yu Shu looked curious. Can Escort Feng show me your skills and broaden my horizons? Feng Chang waved his hand and said, I'm a person who practices external martial arts. I'm not good at internal energy. If you want to broaden your horizons, you have to ask my big brother. Yu Shu shifted her gaze to Boss Show. The latter smiled and stretched out his thumb to press on the corner of the table. Yu Shu looked over and saw a clear fingerprint on the table. Obviously, this was the work of internal energy. Yu Shu was a little surprised. She didn't expect that Zhao Qinghui's uncle, who looked weak and scholarly, would have such skills. No wonder he could manage an escort agency and open it in the capital. Knowing what was going on, Yu Shu showed a hesitant expression. Boss Show saw this and took the initiative to ask, Mr. Yu, what's wrong? If you have something to say, you can say it. Yu Shu sighed first and then said straightforwardly, it's like this. I met a friend a month ago. He was injured and looked for a doctor to treat him. He said that he had internal injuries. He has no relatives in the capital and is only close to me. I want to find a way to treat him. Because I don't know martial arts, I can't get the gist of it. I want to ask Boss Show if there's a way. After the 3 of them heard this, their expressions were different. Boss Show first said, Mr. Yu probably doesn't know that internal energy healing is not an easy thing. Although I'm good at internal energy, I don't know how to heal injuries. Even if I want to help you, I'm really powerless. In fact, Yu Shu didn't intend to ask the other party to treat Jing Chen's injuries. Otherwise, if Kaitashing flared up, wouldn't it harm him? After hearing Boss Show's words, she didn't feel disappointed. Instead, she had a clue. But you don't have to worry. Boss Show comforted her again, this internal injury is not comparable to illness. It won't kill you. Pay more attention to recuperation and buy some tonics to eat. As long as the injury is not too serious, you can recover in 3 to 5 months at most. Yes. Yu Shu nodded and smiled bitterly to herself. If Jing Chen's injuries could be healed in 3 to 5 months, she wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. Because of such a matter mentioned during the dinner, the few of them lost their drunkenness. After a pot of wine, they didn't have a refill. Yu Shu ate her food absent-mindedly. Occasionally, she heard footsteps on the stairs and someone talking drunkenly, so she raised her head to look. At the corner of the stairs, a young man wearing a grass-green robe was supporting a petite young man down the stairs. The young man was probably drunk, and his footsteps were unsteady. Yushu and the others were sitting at the side of the stairs. From her angle, she could only see the young man's back, but she could see the young man's drunken red face. She couldn't help but secretly click her tongue. In terms of appearance, only Xia Mingming could compare to her. Not to mention that her eyes were dazzling when comparing a man to a woman. This kind of rosy drunkenness was 100% a girl. I'm not drunk, you don't need to help me, I can walk by myself, hiccup. Yushu retracted her gaze. When she heard this drunken voice, she couldn't help but raise her eyes to look again. The two people had already gone down the stairs and were walking towards the door. Yushu was looking at the back of the young man who was supporting the young man. She glanced around and saw a pink and green pouch on the ground not far in front of her. She hesitated for a moment, then put down the wine glass and rushed forward. As she bent down to pick it up, she shouted to the people in front of her, "Wrong, wait." The pub was too noisy, so the people in front of her didn't hear her shout. She walked out of the door and waited for her to pick up the pouch. When she looked up, she couldn't see the two people. She pinched the weight of the pouch and felt the banknotes, paper, and silver ingots. She thought to herself that she was in trouble. She turned around and said goodbye to Boss Show and the others, then chased after them. Right now, she was surrounded by misfortune. If she could do one more good deed, it would be good karma. She ran out of the door and stood on the steps in front of the door. She looked left and right and saw the two people walking towards the west side of the street. She jumped down the steps and chased after them. She was afraid that there would be too many people, so she shouted, "Wait, you dropped something." Unfortunately, the two of them didn't even turn their heads. When they reached the end of the street, a carriage drove over. Yushu watched as the two of them got on the carriage like they were deaf, wasting her breath. She was unhappy, but seeing that she couldn't catch up, she weighed the pouch in her hand to test its weight. Squinting her eyes, she jumped up on her tiptoes and looked at the carriage's window. With all her strength, she threw the pouch out. With a whoosh sound, the pouch with the silver ingots flew right into the window. This was the accuracy Yushu had honed from hunting sparrows in the forest. The next moment, she saw the window open and someone holding his forehead looked out. Yushu was about to clap her hands and leave, but she suddenly saw the face that appeared by the window. Her mouth slightly opened, and she was stunned for a moment. She raised her sleeve to cover her face, turned around, and walked back. She silently comforted herself that the person didn't see her. On the carriage, Shuirui clearly saw Yushu's figure and also saw her dodging. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He rubbed his forehead and thought of the first time they met in Yang City a few months ago. His heart moved, and he put the pouch in his hand next to the drunk teenager in the carriage. He lifted the curtain and jumped out of the carriage. He gave the driver a few words and then chased in the direction where Yushu disappeared. Chapter 165. Yushu ran back with her head down. When she turned her head and saw that the carriage with the petal hair had disappeared, she slowed down and walked back to the tavern. The table of food and wine was almost finished. Boss Shou saw that Yushu had returned and asked if she had eaten well. He called the waiter to pay the bill. They said goodbye in front of the tavern. Yushu did not see the man standing across the street. After earning 5 taels this morning, Yushu weighed a jean of flour cakes and sugar cakes at a snack shop on the street. Shuirui followed behind Yushu at a distance and watched Yushu enter the snack shop. After a while, she came out with a few bags in her hand and a piece in her hand. She ate as she walked. This kind of behavior that used to be a bad habit to him, when done by her, seemed to be very natural. He still remembered that time when they went to the Three Purities gathering together and bought breakfast on the street. That was the first time he ate on the street with people coming and going. Now that he thought about it, that feeling of acting as if there was no one else around was not bad. He was not in a hurry to greet her. First, he was afraid that she would turn around and run away when she saw him. Second, he was curious to see what she did every day. At the corner of the street, Yushu found a store with a bookshelf. Unlike the stores in Yang City, where one had to use a bookplate to enter, this store was just like any other ordinary bookstore. However, there was no place for copying books. If one wanted to read a book, one had to buy it. A while ago, she found a few books here that were suitable for Yu Xiaoxiu. At that time, money was tight, so she didn't buy them. Today, she wanted to see if they were sold. Shui Rui followed Yushu into the shop. Seeing her enter the back room, he pretended to wander around the hall. After waiting for a while, he did not see her come out. After hesitating for a moment, he went in. The bookshop at the back of the shop was not big. The bookshelf behind the east shop was not big. There were 4 to 5 rows of bookshelves, and there were a few customers inside. Shui Rui walked a few steps along the side of the bookshelf and saw Yushu, who was squatting down and rummaging under a bookshelf. He did not approach her but retreated to the back of another row of bookshelves. He randomly picked up a book and flipped through it. Occasionally, he would turn his head and glance at her across the shelf, waiting for her to make her choice. Shui Rui was not unfamiliar with such a scene. He lowered his head and smiled. Back then, he did something to kill time. Who would have thought that he would still remember it so clearly after such a long time? Should he blame his good memory, or should he blame her for being too unforgettable? After searching for a while, Yushu found the 2 books that she liked before. She happily patted the dust on her head and took them out to count the money. She did not notice the person who had been standing with her for a long time on the other side of the bookshelf. After leaving Autumn Osmanthus Lane, there were fewer people on the road. As long as Yushu turned her head, she could see Shui Rui walking not far behind her. However, she was busy at the moment. She was holding a bag of snacks under her arm, flipping through a book and holding a piece of cake in her mouth. She did not have the time to look back, let alone look back. Seeing that there were fewer people around, Shui Rui was not afraid that she would disappear into the crowd and was about to go forward to greet her. Just as he raised his hand, before he could call out, a brown-skinned dog suddenly rushed out of the alley in front of them. When it saw Yushu, it stopped on the side of the road and blocked her path with its body, barking wildly, "Woof, woof, woof." Yushu was startled by the dog's barking. She moved her eyes away from the book and saw the vicious dog dripping saliva at her 4 or 5 steps in front of her. Her whole body froze and her face looked like it was about to cry. If there was anything in this world that could make her hair stand on end, this was the #1 thing in the world. "Woof, woof, woof. Don't come over." Yushu's legs went weak. She put one hand in front of her and looked around. Knowing that she could not outrun the dog, she aimed at a short tree in front of her. She swallowed her saliva and threw the half-eaten snack in her hand behind the vicious dog. Taking advantage of the time when the dog turned around, she ran forward, stuffing the book into her arms. When she reached the bottom of the tree, she heard the dogs barking behind her. She hugged the tree trunk with both hands and climbed up desperately. In her panic, one of her shoes fell to the ground. "Woof, woof, woof." Yushu climbed up the tree and hugged the trunk. She was still in a state of shock as she looked at the ferocious dog that was baring its teeth at her. Her forehead was covered in sweat. The dog raised its 2 front legs and tried to jump on the tree several times. It couldn't jump up. Finally, it lowered its head and bit Yushu's shoes that fell to the ground to vent its anger. When the nearby Shui Rui saw this scene, he'd already started laughing to the point his shoulders shook. However, when his gaze moved and saw Yu Shu who was shivering on the tree, he realized that she was really afraid, so he restrained his smile and walked over with large strides. Do you need help? Yu Shu was worrying about how to get rid of the mangy dog when she heard a voice asking her a question. She looked up and saw a person walking towards the tree. When she saw the person's face, she felt as if she had forgotten to look at the almanac. She saw him leave in the carriage with her own eyes. Why did he appear again? Wasn't Ling City so small? It was funny that the brown dog was fierce to Yu Shu, but when it saw Shui Rui walking in front of it, it just turned its head to look at him and then lowered its head to bite Yu Shu's shoes. Yu Shu looked at this irritating scene and asked in a muffled voice, why are you here? I'm doing something nearby and happened to pass by, Shui Rui said with a serious face. After all, it was not a gentleman to follow a woman. Yu Shu looked at him doubtfully. Suddenly, she thought of the handsome gentleman who was with him in Sun Ji Tavern. A strange smile appeared on her face. Oh, you're doing something. Shui Rui saw her strange smile and knew that she was thinking of something bad. When he was about to say something, the big dog beside him suddenly jumped up and down the tree and barked fiercely, woof woof woof. Ah! Yu Shu was so shocked that she almost fell from the tree, and she hugged the tree trunk tightly with both her hands and legs. From Shui Rui's angle, he just happened to be able to see her left foot that had lost her shoe. Half of her snow-white sock had fallen off, revealing her small and round ankle. It was trembling, and that smear of white dazzled him. Shui Rui coughed lightly. Even if he was a gentleman, he would still avoid her gaze. With this interruption, he no longer had the mood to tease her. His face darkened as he stomped on the ground and shouted at the dog that was barking madly, "Go away." This dog also bullied the weak and feared the strong. When it saw that Yu Shu was afraid of it, it chased after her. When it saw that Yu Shu's nose was fierce, it turned around and ran away with Yu Shu's shoe in its mouth. After driving the dog away, Shui Rui looked up at the tree and said, "It's okay. You should come down quickly. Don't fall again when you climb so high." Yu Shu stuck out half of her head, and when she saw that the dog had disappeared, she heaved a long sigh of relief. She looked at Shui Rui who was under the tree, and she wasn't sure if he had seen her embarrassing appearance of being chased by the dog and fleeing in a sorry state. "Can't you get down?" Shui Rui stretched out his hand and happened to touch the tree branch. "Come, let me help you." Without the dog, Yu Shu's alarm was lifted. What was there to be afraid of? She waved her hand to him and said, "No, you can walk to the side." Shui Rui looked at her disdainful gesture and smiled. He obediently took 2 steps back and saw Yu Shu's hands hooking onto the tree trunk. She nimbly flipped over and slid down like a monkey. Her hands loosened and she steadily landed on the ground. With her back facing him, she tidied up her clothes and turned around to thank him. "Thank you." "You're welcome." He followed her on the spur of the moment. Seeing her running away in a panic was enough to make him laugh for a few days. Shui Rui put on a friendly face. If Yu Shu knew what he was thinking, she probably wouldn't thank him. "If there's nothing else, I'll leave." "Don't you have something to do? Go quickly. See you later." Yu Shu waved at Shui Rui as if nothing had happened. Before he responded, she turned around and was about to run away. She had just taken a few steps when she heard laughter behind her. "Wait, are you going back like this?" Yu Shu's footsteps came to a halt and she turned around to look suspiciously at Shui Rui. She followed his gaze that seemed to be pointing at something and lowered her head to examine her feet. When she saw the sock that was about to fall off, only then did she realize that she was missing a shoe. With a whoosh, she pulled her foot back to the back of her thigh, and her eyes darted around in embarrassment as she cursed in her heart. Now, could it be that she had to go home barefoot? "Wait for me here." Don't run around. Seeing her embarrassment, Shui Rui didn't tease her. He turned around and walked back the way he came from. Yushu couldn't run even if she wanted to. If she really went home barefoot, not only would it be inappropriate for passers-by to see her, but if Yu Xiaoxiu found out about it, he would definitely nag at her incessantly. Seeing that Shui Rui had walked far away, she leaned against a tree and pulled up her sock. When she saw passers-by, she pretended to take out a book to read and hid her foot behind her. She waited like this for a long time, but he didn't come back. He can't be playing with me, right? Yu Shu muttered. She did not intend to wait any longer. She thought that if she walked 2 streets ahead, there would be a tailor's shop. She would go there and buy a pair of shoes to wear. She tucked the scroll into her belt and walked forward, 1 foot at a time. She deserved it. As soon as she reached the entrance of the alley, she ran into a family that came out to pour dirty water. A basin of water splashed out from the door. She couldn't react in time and jumped back 2 steps. Just as she was about to fall to the ground, someone caught up with her from behind and stretched out a hand to steady her shoulder. Just then, she heard a light reprimand from above her head. "Didn't I tell you to wait for me?" She tilted her head backwards and saw Shui Rui's handsome face that was slightly panting. Her gaze swept towards the fine sweat that appeared on his forehead, and from the angle of the sunlight, she saw the half-inch scar that was faintly visible on his forehead. The old matters of Yang surged into her mind, and this face that overlapped with her memories suddenly caused her heart to skip a beat. Shui Rui didn't notice Yu Shu's strange expression. He helped her to stand against the wall and handed the paper bag under his arm to the woman. "Put it on." When he found the tailor's shop, he realized that he didn't have any money with him. He was afraid that she would be anxious, so he ran to the pawn shop in Automosmanthus Lane to buy a jade pendant to exchange for money. That was why he was delayed for half an hour. He was afraid that she would run away, but she still ran away. Yu Shu came back to her senses and suppressed the panic in her heart. She took the paper bag from him, turned around, and put on the shoes with her back facing him. Unexpectedly, she found that the shoes he bought fit her feet very well. They were neither too big nor too small. Noticing this detail, she suspiciously turned her head and asked him, "How do you know how big my shoes are?" Shui Rui couldn't say that he just saw her feet on the tree, so he knew, so he joked, "How big a girl's feet can be, you can see it with one look." Who would have thought that this joke would be taken seriously by Yu Shu, and she only saw him as a romantic person. Thinking of his illustrious family background, and the handsome, young man she saw in the restaurant today, she felt that it was more and more true. With this, she felt relieved. She secretly felt that it was funny just now. In terms of age, she was actually older than him by 7 or 8 years. She was really getting confused by a young man. "I've spent all my money on me. I'll return you the money for the shoes another day." As Yu Shu said this, she wrapped up the only shoe she changed into a paper bag and said goodbye to him with a natural expression. "The sun is about to set. If you have something to do, go do it quickly. See you later." When Shui Rui saw that her expression was natural and that she was no longer evading him like before, he vaguely felt that something was amiss. However, he could tell that it was really late at night, so he didn't look into it in detail and nodded at her. The two of them walked with their backs to each other, one to the east and the other to the west. After walking for more than 10 steps, Shui Rui suddenly turned around and shouted at Yu Shu's back, "Aw Shu, don't hit my head with the money pouch next time." Not far ahead, Yu Shu stumbled. Her steady step suddenly turned into a jog, and she disappeared in a flash. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.